Chapter 1434. He abandoned the Tao and cultivated himself alone. No one in the mortal world can kill him. This was Zhao Tailai's evaluation of Du So, the owner of the Sleeping Moon House. At this time, thinking of this old man, Lin Sun suddenly realized that Ba Qi, the quasi-emperor who brought Yun Qinbai to the mortal world, once said that there was a real emperor in the mortal world. And no one could kill this Du So. Could it be that the emperor mentioned by Ba Qi was Du So? Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but look strange. Was the old man really so powerful? Let's go and have a look. Lin Sun was also interested and curious. Of course, the purpose of meeting Du So was to go to the bloodthirsty battlefield. The ultimate purpose of Lin Sun's return to the mortal world this time was to find the way to become a saint. The current emperor once said that there was also a great opportunity for Lin Sun to become a saint in the mortal world. Now, the current emperor, the empress and other terrifying existences in the mortal world had left for the bloodthirsty battlefield more than 10 years ago. This made Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian speculate that the so-called opportunity to become a saint might be in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Lin Sun would not forget that there was an extremely strange and dangerous area in the bloodthirsty battlefield, the mulberry forest. There was a mysterious ice and snow tree, standing in the sky, with a golden cicada lying on it, exuding a sacred, obscure and unfathomable aura. There was also a cold and violent white cicada, which could crack the sky with a cry, startling everyone. There was a blood-colored moth with a holy aura, flapping its wings in the fog. There was a green dragon with a body of thousands of meters long, lying dormant under the earth. Its pupils were as deep as the universe, with horrible visions of the rising and falling of the sun and the sinking of the moon and the changing of time. There was a spiritual broken spear flying in the air, as if possessed by the god of war. There was an enchanting golden flower emitting golden sword light, tearing the heaven and the earth apart. Lin Sun would never forget that when he left the mulberry forest, there had been a shocking change. Green clouds condensed into flowers and fell from the sky. A mysterious and ancient Taoist palace appeared in the world. Just the stairs alone had 9,999 steps, as if it was a stairway to heaven. The aura emitted by the Tao Palace covered the heavens and the earth. It was divine and brilliant, and it dyed the mysterious area in the depths of the mulberry forest with a divine and magnificent luster. Everything seemed so mysterious. Before returning to the mortal world, Lin Sun had roughly guessed that if there was an opportunity to become a saint in the mortal world, it must be in two regions. The other was the ruins of End located in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea. It was one of the 4 ancient ruins of Tao, and it was the most mysterious and terrifying. The other was the mulberry forest in the bloodthirsty battlefield. There were also incredible scenes of holiness. He also learned that the current emperor, the empress, the dean of the Green Deer Academy and other important figures of the empire had gone to the bloodthirsty battlefield more than 10 years ago. This made Lin Sun realize that they were most likely going to the mulberry forest, in a remote and quiet area in the northwest corner of the Forbidden City. A simple and unadorned courtyard was located in the middle of it. On the courtyard gate, there was a horizontal board, embracing stars and sleeping moon residents. The handwriting was crooked, just like the graffiti of a child, which was unbearable to look at. Arriving here, Zhao Jingxian couldn't help but wonder, is it really here? This was the second time Lin Sun came here. With a trace of reminiscence on his face, he said, it's indeed here. I didn't expect that such an immortal name could be a restaurant. He remembered that he was only in the Tao Insight realm at that time. Now, after many years, he was already a supreme king in the 7th retribution of longevity realm. Now his reputation not only spread throughout the empire, but also became the most terrible enemy in the hearts of the 9 tribes of voodoo barbarians. To Lin Sun and Zhao Jingshuan's surprise, when they entered the moon and embracing stars, they found that there were already guests. On a wooden table, there were 4 dishes, a pot of wine, and 2 wine glasses. Beside the wooden table, there was a skinny old man with sparse hair. He was the grumpy due south. They hadn't seen each other for many years, yet he was still that cruel and arrogant appearance, and there wasn't the slightest change in him. Opposite to do so, there was also an old man in a gray robe. His hair and beard were gray, and his face was wrinkled like ravines. He looked extremely old. His sitting posture was upright while his body emitted the aura of time, and it gave others a feeling of vicissitudes of life that assaulted the face. Only his eyes were clear and clean like an infant's, and they were clear to the point they seemed to be able to reflect the deepest secrets in one's heart. But both Do So and the old man's breath were very ordinary. Ordinary people wouldn't take a second look at them. But Lin Sun's cultivation was no longer comparable to that in the past. At a glance, he could tell that although Do So's breath was ordinary, he couldn't capture his breath or figure in his spiritual awareness at all. In other words, if Lin Sun closed his eyes, he couldn't detect Do So's existence at all by the power of his soul. His breath seemed to be completely non-existent, which was extremely magical. As for the old man's aura, it was like the calm surface of the water. It seemed ordinary and unremarkable, but it gave people a feeling that it was vast and boundless. Lin Sun also knew this old man. He was the old priest of the observatory. Before leaving the mortal world for the ancient desolation, Lin Sun had entered the observatory and talked with the old priest once. They also talked about Master Lu Boy. At that time, the old priest once said that Master Lu, who was robbed in the mine prison, was very likely to have something to do with the way of defying heaven and changing fate. Now Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked when he thought about it. He already knew the truth of destroying the mine prison. It was indeed related to the way of defying heaven and changing fate. Because the heaven accessing place had the power to defy heaven and change fate. How could Lin Sun not be surprised that the old priest could make such an inference? These thoughts flashed through Lin Sun's mind, but they brought a kind of mood fluctuation to Lin Sun. He didn't expect that a few clues and a few words back then would actually contain so many secrets that he hadn't noticed. Before, Lin Sun thought that the old priest of the observatory had also gone to the bloodthirsty battlefield with the current emperor. But he didn't expect to see the old priest sitting with Do So when he entered the moon-embracing star's house. "Greetings, 2 seniors." Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian saluted together. "Here come 2 more freeloaders." Do So rolled his eyes and said, "Fortunately, you are qualified to sit." The old priest smiled slightly and looked at Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian for a moment with his clear eyes. Then he said, "Not only are you qualified, but you also came back at the right time." Saying this, he stood up and said, "I'll wait for you at the observatory." Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian were both stunned. They both realized that both Do So and the old priest seemed to have known that they would come. "Sit down, I'll cook something for you." The old priest left. Do So also got up and went into the kitchen to cook. Zhao Jingxian wanted to say something but was stopped by Lin Sun. Lin Sun said with a smile, "This is the old man's character." They sat down. Not long after, Do So prepared some dishes again. They were all very common, but the meat and vegetables matched well. In addition, he prepared a pot of wine for them. Lin Sun picked up the chopsticks and ate quickly. Although he had tasted a lot of delicious food over the years, tasting the dishes cooked by Do So still gave Lin Sun a kind of incomparable enjoyment. The tip of his tongue seemed to loosen all the taste buds, and an indescribable wonderful taste exploded all over his body. Looking at Lin Sun's enjoyment, Zhao Jingxian also picked up the chopsticks and tasted a dish of green vegetables. After just one bite, her eyes widened as if she couldn't believe it. Then, she didn't hold back and started to gorge herself. She ate happily. With their current realm, they could already abstain from food, but the dishes cooked by Do So were too delicious. During this process, Du So sat on one side, squinting his eyes and looking at Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian from time to time without saying anything. When they were full, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh. The meat of the black tengu is delicious enough, but it's not even 1/10 of the taste of these dishes. Zhao Jingxian nodded in agreement. Du So sneered, it's just dog meat. It's not good enough. When you taste dragon liver, phoenix marrow, and rock wing, you will understand what is really delicious. Have you eaten dragon liver, phoenix marrow, and rock wing? Lin Sun asked. The names of dragon liver, phoenix marrow, and rock wing were enough to make people tremble. Du So snorted coldly. Nonsense. You can't even imagine how many delicacies I've eaten. Cut the crap. You've already eaten. Tell me why you're here. Senior, we're here to head to the bloodthirsty battlefield. I wonder if you can give us some pointers? Asked Zhao Jingxian. Your father left this for you. Du So casually tossed a jade slip into Zhao Jingshuan's hand. Zhao Jingxian sized it up and immediately immersed herself in it, not saying a word. What about you? Du So glanced at Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't stand on ceremony and asked, I heard that there's a chance to become a sage in the lower realm. Senior, do you think this opportunity is in the bloodthirsty battlefield? A mocking smile appeared on Du So's lip. You're only at the longevity 7th tribulation realm, and you're already thinking about becoming a sage. Aren't you biting off more than you can chew? Lin Sun said disapprovingly. If I'm willing, I can step into the longevity 8th tribulation realm at any time. As for the longevity 9th tribulation realm, it's destined to be nothing to me. Du So sneered. What if the forbidden Tao tribulation descends? Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat, and his expression changed slightly. He realized that Du So had probably seen through some of his mysteries and knew that he was cultivating the 3 paths. This was extremely unbelievable. If Du So was an ordinary person, how could he casually mention the tribulation he would face? Could it be that he was really an emperor? After a while, Lin Sun calmed down and said indifferently, The great era is coming. It's unprecedented. Everything is possible. If I were afraid of the forbidden Tao tribulation, I wouldn't have chosen this path. He'd seriously pondered this question for a long time while he was in the despair region, and he'd been silently preparing for it. Seeing Lin Sun so calm, Du So was a little surprised. He stared at Lin Sun with his turbid eyes and said, Interesting. P.S. As usual, 2 updates in a row. Chapter 1435. Immediately Du So nodded. You guessed right. This. Well, there is indeed a great opportunity in the mortal world that can help you become a saint. Before Lin Sun could feel happy, Du So said, Unfortunately, you are still a little far away, or it's very difficult for you to seize this opportunity. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Du So sighed. Do you think it's easy to become a saint? Let alone others, look at you now. Your cultivation of qi refining is barely enough. It's at the level of the 7th retribution of longevity. Especially your cultivation of soul refining, you can already dominate the road of longevity. But your cultivation of body refining is too shallow. You're only at the 2nd retribution of longevity. Although your foundation is solid, you lack real tempering and sublimation. If I'm not wrong, you're cultivating the 9 clarity holy physique technique and the body refinement secret technique passed down by the divine elephant martial emperor. You have to be aware that these 2 inheritances can be said to be treasured scriptures that can shake the world. If you only cultivate one, then perhaps your path on the path of body refinement will be slightly easier. But you have 2 kinds of body refining. Do you know what this means? In layman's terms, it's called biting off more than you can chew. If you can't master these 2 secret methods and turn them into your own, this defect alone is enough to prevent you from entering the threshold of becoming a saint. Body refining, the body becomes a saint. Qi refining, the body becomes a saint. Spirit refining, the body becomes a saint. Although the 3 paths of the Tao lead to the same destination, cultivating all 3 paths of the Tao before becoming a saint isn't a simple task. Just like the Tao test, it's the most dangerous moat in front of you. Speaking of this, Du So seemed to feel thirsty. He picked up the flagon and drank a lot. Then he smacked his lips and continued. If it were in the primitive times, it would not be a problem, because at that time there was no such bullshit Tao test. If it were before the advent of this great era, it would be no different from courting death if you dared to do this. Fortunately, this grand era has arrived. The order of the world has changed, and its quintessence has recovered. Even if I'm cultivating in 3 paths, I'll still be able to find a trace of hope. However, even though there's hope, with your current strength, if you don't make up for your shortcomings in body refinement as soon as possible, then you'll probably be unable to even overcome the Tao tribulation, let alone have extravagant hopes of becoming a saint. It's absolutely wishful thinking. Speaking of this, Du So glanced at Lin and said, "So, what you need to do now is not to think about how to become a sage, but how to face the forbidden Tao test." After listening to the long speech, Lin Sun's expression became uncertain, and he had a sense of being woken up by a sudden warning. After returning to the mortal world from the ancient desolation realm, everything had been smooth sailing for him. No matter if it was his cultivation or his work, he hadn't encountered any setbacks. Unknowingly, he had lost a sense of vigilance. This sort of vigilance was targeted towards one's own path towards the Tao, and it was a form of understanding towards the dangerous situations one faced while cultivating. In cultivation, one should not only advance bravely and be fearless of the dangers ahead, but also fight cautiously as if treading on thin ice. Speaking of this, Du So still looked quite serious. The next moment, he said complacently, "What do you think? I said that you are biting off more than you can chew, right?" Lin Sun originally admired and appreciated Du So, but when he saw Du So's complacent look, the admiration in his heart suddenly disappeared. He said indifferently, "Only by looking far can you know what your goal is, so that you won't get lost on the path of seeking Tao and go astray. How can this be called biting off more than you can chew?" Du So's face changed. He picked up the flagon and put it to his mouth, sneering, "Well, tell me, how far have you seen?" Lin Sun thought of a realm he had comprehended when he passed the 8th test of Green Cloud Path. He said, "Between existence and nothingness, life and death are created. With the universe in your heart, you can develop and control the universe." Puff! Du So spurted out the wine in his mouth and coughed violently. His thin face turned red and his hands trembled. He looked at Lin Sun as if he was looking at a monster. "Who told you this?" He didn't believe that Lin Sun could see the realm of creating something out of nothing, which was rare even for emperors. Lin Sun was also surprised and said, "Do I need someone else to tell me this?" Du So's expression changed. He stared at Lin Sun and asked suspiciously, "Did you really see it yourself?" At this moment, being stared at by Du So's cloudy eyes, Lin Sun felt a little uncomfortable for the first time, as if all his secrets were going to be seen through. He couldn't help but frown. Is there anything wrong with this realm? Or should I say, it's a path that has already been proven? Du So let out a long breath and murmured, "If you didn't lie to me, you did see far enough." "Alas, monster, I can't say more," he shook his head. When he looked at Lin Sun, his eyes had become much gentler. He said, "The realm you saw is not wrong. You will understand it later. It's too complicated to tell you now. The Great Way is invisible and endless. You can't understand its mystery unless you explore it yourself." At this time, Zhao Jingxian put away the jade slip in her hand. She had already memorized the content. She looked a little absent-minded and said, "Lin Sun, I may not be able to go to the bloodthirsty battlefield with you." Lin Sun was stunned. "Why?" "Her realm is not enough," Du So said softly and then said, "The most important thing is that the opportunity in that place is too great for her to reach. Zhao Jingxian smiled bitterly, indeed. Her current cultivation level had already broken through to the fourth tribulation of longevity realm, but according to the jade slip left behind by her father, if she wanted to go to the place of great opportunity in the bloodthirsty battlefield, she needed to be at least at the seventh retribution of longevity realm. If she didn't have enough strength, she wouldn't be able to get the opportunity she needed even if she went there. Because the opportunity there was too great, so great that it was enough to make sages crazy. Lin Sun frowned. Even if I can't get the opportunity, it's okay to go and experience it, right? Experience? Du So sneered. Should I say that you are too arrogant or ignorant? I can tell you clearly that even if you go there, you won't be able to reach some of the great opportunities, because those opportunities are not something you can think about at the moment, and they have nothing to do with you. What kind of opportunity? Lin Sun frowned. Du So's eyes were deep as he said, if a true sage can be caught, he can become a great sage. If a great sage can be caught, he can become a sage king. If a sage king can be caught, become an emperor? Lin Sun was shocked. Du So chuckled. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. Even Zhao Jingxian couldn't help but gasp at this moment. Such an opportunity was indeed too great. It was so great that she couldn't reach it at her current realm. Lin Sun felt his scalp tingle and said, there must be many people above the sage realm fighting for such a great opportunity, right? Du So nodded with a smile. Lin Sun said, great sage? Sage king? Or quasi-emperor? Du So was still smiling and said, it's possible. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. Isn't it no different from courting death if I go there? A group of tigers fighting for food. As for me, I'm just an ant. Even if I'm ignored there, I'm afraid I'll be accidentally trampled to death by the claws of these tigers. Du So put away his smile and said seriously, no, in front of those big guys, you're even less than an ant. Lin Sun was speechless. Senior, it's not good to hit people like this, Zhao Jingxian said coldly. Du So laughed, alas, I'm just joking. Don't take it seriously. There's nothing absolute in this world. Since your father asked this boy to go, how could he not take good care of him? Zhao Jingshuan's expression eased a lot. Lin soon realized that the current emperor must have been prepared for such an arrangement. It was impossible for him to die. Go. I've told you what I should. Come back in 10 days and I'll send you to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Du So waved his hand and ordered Lin Sun to leave. My father said that the old priest of the observatory will arrange for me to go to the ultimate. At that time, I can visit Old Toad by the way. After leaving the Sleeping Moon House, Zhao Jingxian and Lin Sun walked side by side on the bustling street. Not long after returning to the mortal world, Old Toad left alone and went to the burial sea grave in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea to look for some clues related to himself. At that time, he had agreed to meet Lin Sun and the others in half a year. Now, the deadline was not far away. Lin Sun realized that the emperor had arranged everything for Zhao Jingxian. He was relieved and said, "That's good. Go to the bloodthirsty battlefield with peace of mind. When you get there, don't force yourself. Just follow my father's arrangement." Zhao Jingxian said softly, "Well, you too. The ultimate is extremely mysterious and unpredictable." Zhao Jingxian interrupted Lin Sun with a smile. "We went there together. How can I not know? Don't worry." Before long, they came to the observatory. There was already a boy standing there, welcoming the two of them. At the top of the observatory, the old priest called Lin Sun alone and said, "Do you remember that we had a chat here before you went to the ancient Desolation Realm?" Lin Sun nodded and said, "Yes." The old priest's eyes were as deep as the sea, clear and bright. He said slowly, "At that time, I divined for you to see whether your future was good or bad. But do you know what I saw?" Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. The next moment, the old priest said, "In front of you is a vast fog. You can't see it. His voice was old, low, with a unique sense of vicissitude. And behind you, the sky and the earth are collapsing, all things are destroyed, and everything is gone. Lin Sun was stiff all over and his eyes were full of divine light. He said, "Senior, what do you mean? I can't understand the divinations." The wrinkles on the old priest's face were intertwined with a trace of complexity. "I tell you this just to let you understand that the road of changing your fate is not easy. You must be careful in the future." Chapter 1436. Lin Sun was silent for a moment, took a deep breath, and saluted to the old priest. He looked calm. The road ahead was foggy and unknown. This was the best. If the future was fixed, it would be too boring after all. If the sky and earth collapsed behind him, everything would cease to exist? To seek the great Tao, one had to move forward, so why would one care about what happened behind them? This divination might mean something, but Lin Sun didn't care about it. He had seen himself, so his mind was so firm that it was impossible for him to be affected by this confusion. Before long, Lin Sun left alone. Zhao Jingxian was about to go to the ultimate ruins, and the old priest would arrange her itinerary. Lin Sun couldn't intervene in these things. "I'll wait for you to come back." Before leaving, Zhao Jingxian looked at Lin Sun seriously with calm eyes. "Take good care of yourself. You too." Lin Sun reached out and hugged the girl in front of him. 3 days later. The sky was clear and the Forbidden City was as prosperous and noisy as before. The streets extending in all directions were crowded with pedestrians and carriages. It was even more lively than before. Today's empire had pacified the demon beasts in its territory, and the disaster of voodoo barbarians in the border area had long been resolved. There were many things waiting to be done in the world. Suddenly, the sky darkened and the light was obscured. Black clouds as heavy as lead covered the entire sky of the Forbidden City like a tide. In an instant, the day seemed to fall into an eternal night. There was a sudden commotion in the city. Cultivators, peddlers, dignitaries, and ordinary people were all alarmed. What happened? What a terrible tribulation cloud! Many strong people in the Imperial Palace, Green Deer School, the commune of spiritual tattooists, and a group of aristocratic forces were shocked and depressed. This tribulation cloud was simply too shocking and terrible. Who is going to pass the tribulation? Countless eyes finally gathered on Heart-Cleansing Peak, where a huge vortex of tribulation cloud like an inverted funnel emerged in the sky. The vortex floated quietly, but it emitted a terrible and boundless aura of destruction, which seemed to make the world tremble. In the Forbidden City, everyone felt oppressed and suffocated, especially the practitioners, who were most sensitive to the heaven's might and were more strongly affected by it. Along with the passage of time, the tribulation clouds that were dense like ink gathered more and more, and the originally bright and beautiful day had transformed into darkness that was like an eternal night, causing all living beings to feel oppressed and horrified. The top of Heart-Cleansing Peak. With his hands behind his back, Lin Sun stood on the edge of the cliff, his clothes and thick black hair fluttering in the wind. He looked calm and composed. The fated disaster had finally arrived. But Lin Sun's heart was calm. Because he had waited for too long, and he had long since lost all fear. In the distance, Lin Zhong, Yang Ku, Zhu Laosan, Vulture and other big shots of Lin family, as well as clansmen, villagers of Feiyun village, maids and servants were all looking at them nervously. This tribulation was so shocking that they could hardly breathe. How could they not be nervous for Lin Sun? Boom! Suddenly, a bolt of lightning exploded in the depths of the dense black tribulation clouds, and it was so loud that it shook the sky and covered the surroundings. It shook the void so violently that it began to distort. In the Forbidden City, some practitioners' hearts twitched fiercely. They saw stars and their souls shook violently. Even if it was an expert at the King Realm, his expression was heavy and extremely astounded. How could such a tribulation be so terrible? It can only prove that the head of Lin family in Heart-Cleansing Peak is too powerful, So the tribulation he encountered is not ordinary. Longevity tribulation. How can he survive it? At this moment, the huge forbidden city was covered with black clouds and the atmosphere was oppressive. Countless big shots were guessing and watching. Lin Sun, the well-deserved first in longevity king realm in the empire, wiped out the demons and scared off the 9 branches of voodoo barbarians. He saved the empire from the abyss of suffering alone and was remembered, appreciated and respected by all living beings in the world. He was like a legend, destined to be recorded in the annals of history and be remembered forever. Today, he would usher in the 8th tribulation of longevity, the fated disaster. On the observatory, the old priest looked into the distance in silence with deep eyes. In the moon house with stars in arms, Duso seemed to be annoyed and muttered, "It's just a tribulation. Who is he trying to scare by making such a big noise?" Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the terrifying sound of thunder resounded out like a drum being struck by a god. It rumbled and resounded within the black clouds, and it shook the heavens and the earth to the point it seemed to be shaking. Duso, who was annoyed, was stunned and showed a meaningful smile. "It's interesting. Such a powerful, fated disaster. I haven't seen it before. Indeed, I haven't seen it before." On the observatory, the old priest murmured, and his eyes became more and more deep. Crack, crack, crack. Before long, dazzling lightning tore the black clouds. The dazzling light cut through the darkness and illuminated the world like hundreds of millions of silver snakes dancing wildly. Countless people in the Forbidden City were stunned by such a spectacle. Some ordinary people had knelt on the ground trembling and murmured, as if they were praying for the blessings of the gods. "Here it comes," on the top of heart-cleansing peak. Lin Sun was not nervous at all. Instead, he smiled leisurely. He even picked up a wine gourd and drank freely. His robe and black hair fluttered in the wind. He drank alone under the whirlpool of tribulation clouds. Above his head, the thunder was raging and the lightning was flowing. His calm, composed, and peerless bearing caused others to be unable to help but be stunned. Boom! Finally, a strand of gorgeous tribulation lightning surged into appearance from within the vortex, and it actually transformed into a rain of light that sprayed down. Every single strand of rain of light was crystalline, translucent, multicolored, and formed from the most terrifying tribulation lightning. The rain of light that filled the sky descended together. That shocking scene was magnificent and brilliant to the extreme, and also terrifying to the extreme. Abnormal! Duso stared with his eyes wide open, as if he couldn't believe it. "It's really extraordinary." On the observatory, the old priest seemed to be surprised. As for other people in the Forbidden City, they only felt that the rain of light pouring down was like the fairy light from the sky. It was gorgeous, blazing, magnificent, dazzling and soul-stirring. Only some old monsters in the king's realm could understand how terrible this thunder was. Just looking at it from a distance, they felt frightened and scared. On the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun didn't take any action. He was still drinking. However, a bottomless abyss suddenly appeared on his body, and it was slowly rotating. All kinds of profound truths floated in the abyss, deducing the grand scene of the fusion of water and fire, the coexistence of yin and yang, the rotation of Tai Chi, and the roar of the real dragon. Before the endless thunder rain covered Lin Sun's figure, it was swallowed up by the slowly rotating abyss. It disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. From the beginning to the end, there was not a single ripple or collision. Only Lin Sun's figure seemed more and more tall and gorgeous. All the experts who noticed this scene were dumbfounded. Is this even possible? From a distance, Heart-Cleansing Peak was like a whale swallowing water. It opened its big mouth and swallowed all the thunder. Such a spectacle was rare in one's life. Abnormal, it's really abnormal, Duso murmured. The old priest let out a sigh of admiration. Boom! In the sky, black clouds were rolling and thunder was rumbling. The dense lightning was like hundreds of millions of pythons and dragons roaring and rolling. The dazzling light illuminated the world. The thunder became more and more terrible. It was like a long waterfall hanging down. It was completely derived from the thunder. It was mighty and turbulent. The huge forbidden city was completely filled with a kind of oppressive and terrible destructive atmosphere. Countless creatures trembled. Even the old monsters of King's realm felt cold all over and their hearts were hanging in their throats. They had never seen such a great tribulation. It was going to destroy the world and eliminate all the vitality in the world. But it was incredible that Lin Sun, on the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, seemed to be unaware of it. He raised his head and drank happily. No matter how terrifying the tribulation lightning that could terrify even gods and ghosts changed, it was still devoured by the abyss that appeared around him. For a moment, many people were dumbfounded. How terrifying was his cultivation! How much confidence did he have to that he dared to vanquish the lightning tribulation that filled the sky in such a relaxed manner? This seemed to be too shocking. It even subverted people's cognition and imagination. The fetters of fate are nothing more than this. The old priest was thoughtful. He vaguely felt Lin Sun's foundation and ability at the moment. Du So smiled. That's interesting. It didn't take long. Both the old priest and the Du So squinted their eyes. Their expressions gradually turned serious, to the point of being stern. In the sky, the clouds gradually calmed down, the thunder became low, and the lightning became obscure. But the atmosphere between heaven and earth was more and more oppressive. Soon, some strongmen of King's realm also noticed that something was wrong and their faces changed suddenly. As for all living beings in the Forbidden City, they were surprised and didn't notice the mystery. They all thought that the vast thunder tribulation was coming to an end. In fact, it was coming to an end. But before the end, there was an extremely terrible thunder tribulation accumulating and brewing. It was coming. Before long, the world was silent, the clouds stopped, and the lightning and thunder disappeared. A strange silence enveloped heaven and earth. That kind of oppressive force made all practitioners feel drowning and suffocating. They were stiff all over and almost couldn't bear it. On the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun, who raised his head and drank the last drop of wine, threw the gourd away. Then, he suddenly looked up. In the depths of his dark eyes, the thunder tribulation that was accumulating above the sky was reflected clearly, but it couldn't set off any waves in his eyes. Whoosh! With his clothes fluttering, Lin Sun stepped into the air. From a distance, it was like a big abyss suddenly swept up from the earth, shining with infinite Taoist light. At the same time, in the sky, in the depths of the stagnant whirlpool of clouds, a thunder tribulation swept out silently. The shape of the thunder tribulation showed the shape of a spear, obscure, dark, and entangled with the supreme power of law. At that moment, the world was dim, and the sun and moon were dim. It was just a thunder tribulation, but it was like a spear of judgment representing the will of God, coming to the world. The whole city was shocked and all living beings trembled. P.S. As usual, 2 updates in a row. Chapter 1437. This was the last tribulation thunder. But it was silent like a spear of judgment, coming to the world. At this moment, all living beings were trembling, and the whole city was silent. Even Du So and the old priest couldn't help narrowing their eyes with a solemn look. On the other hand, amidst this deathly silent atmosphere, Lin Sun, who was standing in the air, suddenly flashed up like a ray of light that shot into the sky, and he stretched out his hand to grab the tribulation lightning spear. Countless eyes were frozen at this moment, and their minds went blank. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would be so direct and bold. Du So and the old priest were both dizzy and caught off guard. That was the most terrifying tribulation lightning. Even they could sense that the power of that tribulation lightning was extremely unusual. But Lin Sun directly took action. Thinking about it carefully, This was the first time that Lin Sun really took action since he passed the tribulation. Before, he had been drinking and ignoring the tribulation thunder. But who could have thought that as soon as he took action, there would be such an earth-shattering scene? Boom! A loud explosion broke the silence of the world and knocked on everyone's heart fiercely. Lin Sun had already firmly grasped the bolt of tribulation lightning, and a peerlessly terrifying and dazzling ray of light erupted between them, causing the space there to rumble and collapse. Looking from a distance, it was like a god subduing a dragon from the sky. He looked incomparably brave and domineering. Boom! The tribulation thunder was like a spear, struggling violently. The obscure lightning representing the power of heaven was flowing, producing a terrible destructive breath like a landslide and a tsunami. But to everyone's shock, Lin Sun suddenly let out a long roar, grabbed the tribulation thunder with both hands, and then exerted his strength. Crack! Amidst the earth-shattering noise, the battle spear was forcefully broken into two. Those old monsters of the King realm were all stunned, and their hearts were filled with endless shock. All living beings in the Forbidden City only saw a godlike figure breaking a light in the sky. Du So suddenly patted his thigh. "It's so damn interesting." The old priest smiled instead. A wisp of gratification and indescribable emotion appeared on his face that was densely covered in wrinkles. Rumble, the thunder was broken and suddenly turned into a terrible rain of thunder and lightning. It exploded in Lin Sun's palm, illuminating the whole world. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was like a stone standing in the stormy waves, motionless no matter how the waves washed him. This scene was like a brand, becoming an indelible mark in the hearts of everyone in the Forbidden City. Even after many years, people still remembered that there was once a person who broke the heavenly tribulation lightning and broke the heavenly tribulation. In that instant, his figure was like a ray of light that illuminated the sky. On this day, Lin Sun passed the 8th tribulation of longevity and broke through the fate disaster. It shocked the Forbidden City and made all living beings tremble. When the tribulation clouds dissipated, the darkness faded, and daylight reappeared in the world, everyone felt as if they were in a dream. With this child in the Lin clan, no one can shake them. Many families and forces sighed inwardly. Young Master Lin is truly a god. The city was in an uproar, everyone discussing excitedly. On Heart-Cleansing Peak, there was also a jubilation. Every clansman of the Lin family looked proud, awe-inspiring, reverent and fanatical. Even the villagers of Feiyun Village, those servants and servants were so excited that they danced with joy. Today, Lin Sun didn't need any praise at all. As long as he was there, he would be a legend that amazed the world. And this legend belonged to their Lin family. Whoosh! After passing the tribulation, Lin Sun meditated quietly. He only felt that his whole body was smooth, his mind was clear, and his spirit was clear. He felt that he could follow his heart and follow the rules. Passing the fate disaster was like breaking an invisible shackle on the road of longevity and breaking free from a kind of invisible bondage. He was free and unrestrained. Besides that, the essence, energy, spirit, and cultivation in his body had undergone a tremendous change, and he was much stronger than before. But the biggest gain was a kind of self-confidence and invincible will. Lin Sun was very clear that the path he was walking on was different from the world, and also different from the path of others of the same generation. This road could be called unprecedented. Because of this, it seemed incomparably difficult and dangerous. But in the same way, every time his cultivation advanced a step, the power he gained was also extremely amazing, which was incomparable to others. The 9th tribulation, named longevity, is the last obstacle on the road of longevity. But as long as there is no mistake, it can't stop me. Lin Sun pondered while feeling the changes of the power around him. The most urgent thing to consider is the prohibition of Tao. Du So once said that there was a defect in his body. If it couldn't be made up, it was very likely that he couldn't pass the prohibition of Tao. This defect was the cultivation of body refining. From now on, I should focus on body refining. Before the arrival of the prohibition of Tao, I should thoroughly integrate the 9 pure holy body scripture and the inheritance of divine elephant martial emperor Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a touch of firmness. The prohibition of Tao was the most terrible and dangerous tribulation before becoming a sage. It was like a natural moat. After the primitive times, no one could surpass it. Now, it happened to be a great era, which gave Lin Sun a chance to pass this tribulation. So in any case, he must firmly grasp it. After I leave, I don't know when I can come back. Among these treasures, there are some holy treasures, king medicines and divine treasures. They will be kept by Grandad Zhong in Lin family. 7 days later, Lin Sun found Lin Zhong and entrusted him with the task. Today, he was going to Sleeping Moon House to enter the bloodthirsty battlefield with the help of Due South. Before leaving, he must explain and entrust some things to Lin Zhong. As he said, Lin Sun took out a storage bracelet and handed it to Lin Zhong. In this storage bracelet were some of the most precious treasures collected by Lin Sun, such as all kinds of king medicines, divine materials, and some holy treasures, such as the pitch-black alms bowl obtained from Gu Fozi, and a big halberd obtained from Bai Longting. There were 7 or 8 treasures in total. In the outside world, each of them was enough to make sages drool. But for Lin Sun, although these treasures were valuable, they were not necessary. Instead of gathering dust in his hands, it was better to stay in Lin family. Young master, you must take care of yourself. Although Lin Zhong knew that this day would come, his heart was still full of reluctance and worry when this day came. Grandad Zhong, you should also take care of yourself. On Heart Cleansing Peak, I am most concerned about Grandad Zhong. In the future, you can leave the trivial things in your hands to others and spend the rest of your time on cultivation. I believe that with your aptitude, you are destined to embark on the road of immortality in the future. Lin Sun looked serious. When he first entered the Forbidden City, Lin Zhong had been following him silently. For Lin Sun, Lin Zhong was his most trusted and closest elder, who was irreplaceable. He had left some ancient books and experiences of cultivation to Lin Zhong, and prepared the spiritual medicines and treasures needed for Lin Zhong's cultivation. He did this in the hope that Lin Zhong could become stronger and live longer. Good. Lin Zhong was very emotional and said, I must live until you come back. Lin Sun was speechless and said with a smile, Who knows, maybe I will come back in a while. I heard a saying that as long as you can see each other in the future, it's not a farewell. Don't be too sad, Grandad Zhong. Lin Zhong took a deep breath and nodded. I understand. Next, Lin Sun met Young Ku, Vulture, Zhu Laosan, Lin Huiyuan, Lin Xiefeng, Red Eagle King and other important figures of Heart Cleansing Peak. Knowing that Lin Sun was going to set off again and they didn't know when he would come back, they were more or less reluctant to see him go, but they gave more blessings and exhortations. This made Lin Sun's heart warm. Being cared for by others would not make one feel so lonely. Whether it was familial affection or friendship, it was always better than being alone. Chirp! When Lin Sun was about to leave, suddenly, a rapid chirp sounded from a distance. Then, a fire shadow came through the air. Looking closely, it was a little guy as round as a ball and red all over. Chirp! Lin Sun was stunned. Did this little guy wake up? Many years ago, Qiuqiu had fallen into a strange slumber and had never woken up. When he returned to the mortal world, Lin Sun went to visit this little guy. Unfortunately, Chirp was still sleeping at that time. According to Little Silver's investigation, Chirp was a very rare fire spirit, which was born in the divine fire of nature. This kind of creature was not rare in ancient times. They had different talents and different ways of cultivation. For example, Chirp's way of cultivation was to sleep. Because it was a fire spirit, its life was extremely long and there was almost no trouble of birth, old age, illness and death. But in the same way, its speed of promotion and transformation was extremely slow. With a whoosh, Chirp's soft and round body bumped into Lin Sun's arms. Then it opened a pair of round black eyes and seemed very excited. It kept chirping. Lin Sun reached out and poked Chirp's belly. It was still as soft and elastic as before, like a soft ball. He couldn't help but feel happy. In the bloodthirsty camp, Chirp accompanied him. After so many years, the little guy was still as charming and adorable as before. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was going to the bloodthirsty battlefield today, so he couldn't take Chirp with him. Until Lin Sun left, Chirp's eyes were full of tears, and it kept chirping. Lin Sun couldn't bear to see it. But in the end, he could only comfort it gently and let it cultivate on heart-cleansing peak and wait for him to come back. In the afternoon, at dusk, Lin Sun came to star-embracing Sleeping Moon House alone. "Are you ready?" Do So had been waiting there for a long time. Lin Sun nodded. Do So said, "Take this thing with you as a token of my appreciation. If you encounter an enemy you can't fight with, you can scare them with this thing. Maybe you can save your life." As he said, he took out a gray domino and threw it to Lin Sun. Chapter 1438. The domino was the size of a palm, gray and inconspicuous. But when it fell into Lin's hand, it was like a towering mountain pressing down on him. Lin was caught off guard and his body trembled. He hurriedly ran his strength to hold the domino firmly in his hand. "Is this meant to scare people?" Lin Sun was stunned. When he was about to check it with his spiritual awareness, he was stopped by Do So. "You'd better not do that if you don't want to be scared to death." Scared to death? Lin Sun was doubtful, but he chose not to try when he saw Do So's serious expression. Do So grinned and said, "Although it's meant to scare people, this treasure is priceless. You must keep it well." Lin Sun frowned. "Can this thing frighten a saint?" Do So said disdainfully, "A saint is nothing. I might as well tell you that this domino can frighten anyone below the Emperor realm. After all, it's a gift from me. How can it be compared with ordinary ones?" There was an indescribable pride in his tone. Lin Sun played with the domino and stared at Do So. "How about I try it on you?" Do So was stunned and said angrily, "It's my thing. How can it frighten me? You'd better stop thinking about it. Remember, this thing can only be used once. Don't use it unless it's a life-and-death situation." After that, he waved his sleeve without giving Lin Sun a chance to respond. In an instant, the two of them disappeared without a trace. There was a forbidden place in the depths of the imperial palace. A simple and old hall stood there. In front of the hall, there was a 5-color altar full of vicissitudes, as if it had existed since ancient times. There was a horizontal board hanging above the hall, Bloodthirsty Hall. Lin Sun recognized at first glance that he had been here before. When he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield for the first time, he was brought here by Zhao Tailai and left through this ancient transmission formation. However, when he saw the bloodthirsty hall and the ancient transmission formation again, Lin Sun thought of many things. Was this arranged by Master Lu himself? Lin Sun said softly. Do So asked, "Who?" Lin Sun said, "Lu Boya." Do So was surprised. "You already know?" The establishment of Bloodthirsty Camp is related to Master Lu. How could the existence of Bloodthirsty Hall have nothing to do with Master Lu? Lin Sun sighed with emotion. According to my speculation, Master Lu is likely to be an expert in the Emperor-to-be realm. With his attainments in spiritual tattoos, it's not difficult for him to set up such a transmission formation. Do So grunted and said, "Over 10 years ago, the upheaval of the world erupted completely, and the bloodthirsty battlefield has become completely different. You'll know once you go there." He waved his sleeve. The ancient 5-colored altar shone and suddenly produced a strange rumbling sound, as if it had just woken up from its slumber. Lin Sun was about to take action, but he was stopped by Do South. He stared at Lin Sun with a strange look in his eyes. "You have the breath of another creature." Lin Sun was stiff all over. How could this be seen through? Little Silver, come out. His heart stirred. With a swoosh, Little Silver's figure rushed out. Dussault's eyes lit up, and he stared at Little Silver for a long while before he laughed and said, "Interesting, a spirit-eating insect that has embarked on the extreme Tao path, awakened its innate magical power, and became a real insect king of the longevity realm. Not even one could be found in ancient times. It seems that this little guy has also obtained a lot of opportunities and benefits in this great era." He saw through Little Silver's background at a glance. Lin Sun was secretly shocked. Was this old guy really in the Emperor-to-be realm? "You can go now." Dussault withdrew his gaze and waved his hand, not stopping Little Silver from leaving with Lin Sun. "Senior, goodbye." Lin Sun took a deep breath and strode to the altar with Little Silver. In the next moment, his figure disappeared. Dussault watched this scene silently until the teleportation portal returned to silence. Only then did he feel relieved. He let out a long breath and murmured, "Before Zhu Gui becomes a saint, it all depends on whether you can seize this opportunity to break the forbidden curse of the Tao, the bloodthirsty battlefield." The world was vast. Mountains rose and fell one after another. The rich purple spiritual qi was like a rolling sea of clouds, flowing and steaming in the sky. The mountains and rivers on the earth were picturesque. Every single mountain was extraordinarily beautiful, verdant, and full of vitality. Every river was filled with spiritual mist. When the waves rose and fell, they were covered with a scale-like luster. Even the rocks and plants were crystal clear. The void was filled with rich spiritual qi. Strands of violet, auspicious energy drifted about on the top of a precipitous mountain. A handsome figure stood there as he gazed into the surroundings. His face carried a smear of shock that could not be erased. This person was Lin Sun, who had just arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield. But at this moment, he suspected that he had come to the wrong place. In Lin Sun's memory, the bloodthirsty battlefield was gray, the earth was gloomy, and the wilderness was vast. There was no grass growing everywhere, and there were signs of desolation. On the ground, rotten and broken corpses were covered with dust, and the air was filled with a bloody and rancid smell. Gloominess, loneliness, blood, depression outlined the gray color of the bloodthirsty battlefield. The most important thing was that there was no spiritual power in the bloodthirsty battlefield. The army of practitioners of the Empire stationed here all needed to rely on elixirs to replenish their strength. But now everything had changed. Between heaven and earth, everything was thriving. The spiritual qi was rich, and the mountains and rivers were beautiful. The rolling spiritual qi and vitality were like a roaring torrent, diffusing between heaven and earth. This was not the bloodthirsty battlefield in his memory. It was a vast, beautiful world like a paradise of immortals. Every flower and grass was condensed with crystal light. Although they were not spiritual materials or elixirs, they were completely different from the plants and could be called spiritual objects. Lin Sun breathed. His mouth and nose were full of fresh, rich, and lively spiritual qi, which made him feel relaxed and happy. Everything has changed in more than 10 years. The spiritual qi here is so rich and pure that it is even better than that in the upper 9 realms of the absolute domain. No. There is a trace of divine power in the spiritual qi between heaven and earth, which is of great benefit to the cultivation of practitioners in the longevity realm. 1 day's cultivation here is equivalent to 1 month's cultivation in the outside world. After a long time, Lin Sun gradually calmed down from the shock and began to perceive the completely different bloodthirsty battlefield. The higher the cultivation realm, the more demanding the demand for resources. A fish could swim happily in a quagmire, but when a fish transformed into a dragon, how could a small quagmire bear it? When Lin Sun was young, his cultivation in the Empire was like a fish growing up in a quagmire. Now he was the supreme king of the 8th retribution of longevity realm. If he still cultivated in the Empire, he would never be able to step into the absolute saint realm. The reason was very simple. The cultivation resources in the Empire were far from enough to meet his needs. What's more, he lacked the opportunity for cultivation. Even though the great changes of the world made the Empire different, he could only come to the bloodthirsty battlefield to seek the way to become a saint. No wonder the great emperor once said that the inferior world also had the opportunity to become a saint. With the great changes of the world, the bloodthirsty battlefield was completely different. Lin Sun took a deep breath and completely accepted the reality in front of him. Whoosh! The next moment Lin Sun disappeared. 2 hours later, Lin Sun's figure floated down on the bank of a mighty river, with a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. The bloodthirsty battlefield had completely changed. According to his memory, he thought he could find the entrance to the mulberry forest soon. But he never thought that the world here was completely different from what he remembered. It had become many times larger. The place where the sun rises in the opposite direction of the setting sun is the camp of our empire. This was a sentence in the Animal Skin Handbook given to Lin Sun by Zhao Tailai when he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield for the first time. But was there any camp of the Empire in the bloodthirsty battlefield at this time? Lin Sun thought for a moment, looked at the sky, identified the direction, and planned to set off again. But at this moment, he narrowed his eyes and sensed an extremely pure and amazing spiritual breath at the bottom of the river with his divine sense. With a flash, he had entered the bottom of the river. The river was tumbling, and a fist-sized crystal lay quietly at the bottom of the river, emitting a magnificent and illusory divine luster. What was this? Lin Sun raised his hand and grabbed the crystal in his hand. After looking at it for a while, he was surprised. The crystal was full of pure divine breath, very much like the legendary divine crystal. Divine crystal was a kind of treasure that had almost disappeared in the outside world. It was extremely rare, and could only be produced in the holy spiritual veins. The divine power contained in this thing had an immeasurable promoting effect on the cultivation of practitioners. For the cultivation of sages, ordinary blessed places couldn't meet their needs at all. But if there was divine crystal, the problem of cultivation could be easily solved. Such a treasure was useless even if it fell into the hands of practitioners below the king realm. Because the power contained in divine crystal was too high and huge, ordinary practitioners couldn't bear and refine it at all. As far as Lin Sun knew, such a thing couldn't be found in such a big empire. Even in the ancient Desolation territory, only those ancient orthodoxies had it. Divinity origin crystals can actually be condensed in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Lin Sun thought in his heart, it seems that even for sages, this place can be called a treasure place for cultivation. He put away the divine crystal and rushed out from the bottom of the river to start his action. Along the way, under Lin Sun's careful investigation, he collected some divine crystals in succession in the mountains and rivers, big and small, full of divinity. Moreover, in some mountains where the spiritual qi was extremely abundant, there were some rare magic medicines and magic materials, which were also picked up by Lin Sun without hesitation. At this time, Lin Sun had completely concluded that if the upper 9 realms of the absolute peak domain was suitable for the kings on the road to longevity, then the bloodthirsty battlefield could completely meet the needs of the saint realm. Chapter 1439. When Lin Sun came to a mountain full of spirituality, he couldn't help but be moved. Such a mountain could be regarded as a rare blessed abode. But now, no one occupied it. If I cultivate here, thinking of this, Lin Sun took a deep breath. Boom! It was like a primordial divine dragon inhaling qi. He inhaled for the time it takes to boil a pot of tea. The area around the mountain was filled with a violent tempest that shattered the clouds in all directions. Rolling spiritual qi poured into Lin Sun's body from all directions, making his whole body shine. Every inch of his skin and flesh was greedily absorbing the magnificent and pure spiritual qi. In the end, all the spiritual qi was refined in the power of flesh and blood. Almost instantly, Lin Sun noticed that his cultivation of body refining was obviously a little stronger. Even if it was just a little stronger, Lin Sun was moved. It was only a single breath, yet it allowed his body refinement strength to increase by a trace. It was obvious how fast his cultivation would improve if he cultivated here with all his might. In addition, there are many divine crystals, rare magic medicines, magic materials. If I can make full use of them, my cultivation of body refining can be improved faster. Lin Sun's black eyes were bright. He had come to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Even if he went to the mulberry forest at this time to meet the big shots such as the Emperor and the Empress, he was doomed to get no benefits when he encountered a great opportunity. Because his cultivation was not enough to break through to the Saint realm. After Du So's guidance, Lin Sun realized that what he needed to consider at present was not to become a saint, but to pass the Tao test of Forbidden Path. If he wanted to pass this test, he must make up for the shortcoming of body refining cultivation. Before, Lin Sun had no clue. Now, after several hours of cognition and exploration, he had a plan in mind. The bloodthirsty battlefield was the best place for cultivation. But before that, I'd better find out the situation first. While Lin Sun was thinking, he had already set out again. To his surprise, he didn't meet a living creature along the way, trekking between mountains and rivers. There were no fierce beasts, birds of prey, plants, or even traces of insects between the mountains and rivers. It should be known that the spiritual qi and vitality in this world were extremely rich, which was the most likely place for the birth of life. But until now, Lin Sun hadn't met a living creature. This seemed to be very strange and unusual, and it made it extremely difficult for him to obtain any information. 3 hours later, within the scope of Lin's spiritual awareness, he immediately sensed a fierce collision and roar. There's an aura of battle 1,300 miles to the east. Looks like one of them is a human. Lin Sun was refreshed. Finally, he saw a living person. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk his figure flashed and turned into a stream of light that tore through the void. In just a few breaths, Lin Sun was already thousands of miles away. At this time, Lin Sun could see a group of figures fighting fiercely without using his spiritual awareness. 7 of them were humans, and they were in the same camp. Each of them had a powerful cultivation base of immortal-level monarch. Lin Sun couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Looking at their opponents, they were also humanoid. There were both men and women, but they were clearly not human. Every single one of them had blood-red hair, skin that was a gorgeous and lustrous white color, and a pair of bright silver wings on their back. Feather Spirit Clan? Lin Sun was stunned. In the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, there were many indigenous clans, most of which were descendants of the ancient clans, such as the Bloody Lion Clan, the Dragon Whale Clan, the Golden Phoenix Clan, the Herculean Ox Clan, the Black Turtle Clan, the Cloud Dragon Clan, the Blackwood Clan, and so on. When Lin Sun, Zhao Jingxian, and a group of disciples of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure went to the ultimate ruins, they had fought with the saints of those clans in the secret realm of monsters. He had also seen the overmatch of the Feather Spirit Clan. But Lin Sun didn't expect to see the overmatch of the Feather Spirit Clan in the bloodthirsty battlefield. How could they appear here? Lin Sun had been to the bloodthirsty battlefield before. At that time, there were only 2 major forces, the Empire and the Voodoo Barbarian camp. But now, it was obviously different. It seems that the situation in the bloodthirsty battlefield is more complicated than I thought. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed. Without hesitation, Lin Sun rushed over directly. "You've gone too far." A slim woman in a red dress shouted angrily in the fierce battle. As she spoke, she waved her hand and threw out a 300-meter-long flaming blade. But it was easily defeated by an overmatch of the Feather Spirit Clan. With one slash, the woman in red's pretty face turned pale, and she staggered back. "Miss Yi, the situation is dangerous. If it goes on like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on until the reinforcements arrive. Several men and women in other directions were extremely anxious. They were also in a dangerous situation, and many of them had been injured. Hold on a little longer. I've just asked my brother for help. I believe he will come soon. The woman in red took a deep breath and transmitted her voice to them. Oh, do you still think someone will come to save you? Wishful thinking. I'm not afraid to tell you that your reinforcements have been wiped out now. A young man of the Feather Spirit clan sneered. What? The faces of Miss Yi and others all changed, and many of them showed despair. The reason why they could hold on until now was that they firmly believed that reinforcements would come. But if even the reinforcements were blocked, then everything would be over. As for their opponents, their expressions were cold, and they looked at Miss Yi and the others as if they were dead. Finish the battle quickly, the leading Feather Spirit clan expert shouted. Look! But at the same time, someone cried out. A figure, like an illusory divine rainbow, tore through the air, bringing with it a roar. The divine ray of light stopped, and then a tall and handsome figure appeared. He raised his hand and pointed. Beams of sword chi suddenly swept out, dazzling and peerlessly sharp, illuminating the sky. In an instant, the bodies of more than 10 Feather Spirit clan experts were minced and cut by the peerless sword chi, and their flesh and blood exploded in the void like fireworks. In an instant, the sword chi appeared, and the group of enemies was annihilated. No one survived. The woman in red was stunned, and her eyes widened. That was a group of Feather Spirit clan experts, and even the weakest one was at the longevity third tribulation realm. Previously they had been forced into despair. But now they were easily harvested like weeds. Everything happened too abruptly, and it ended in an instant. But the shock it caused hit the hearts of the woman in red and the others like a great river. Yi Hongxue from the Yi family of Donghai pays respect to you, senior. Thank you for saving our lives. The woman in red was the first to react, and she bowed to him. The others also suddenly woke up from the shock, and hurriedly stepped forward to salute. As they spoke, they all saw Lin Sun's appearance clearly, and they couldn't help but be surprised. It seemed that they didn't expect him to be so young. However, the one who had reached the peak was the teacher, and the strong were respected. It was only right for him to address Zhang Xian as a senior. The one who came to rescue was Lin Sun. He looked at the woman in red, Yi Hongxue, and asked, Yi family of Donghai? Who is Yi Qintian to you? Yi Hongxue said respectfully, Senior, it's my father. Are you Yi Qi's elder sister or younger sister? Lin Sun asked. When he was cultivating in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun didn't have many friends, and Yi Qi was one of them. Yi Hongxue seemed a little surprised, but she still replied, Yi Qi is my elder brother. Lin Sun said with a smile, In that case we are not strangers. My name is Lin Sun, and your elder brother is my friend. Yi Hongxue was stunned and said with surprise, So you are Lin Sun, the head of Heart Cleansing Peak in the capital? Lin Sun touched his nose and said with a smile, I dare not say that I am the head of Heart Cleansing Peak in the capital. By the way, don't call me senior. I'm not as old as you think. The others also reacted and showed a look of understanding. Obviously, they had all heard of Lin Sun. Then I'll call you Brother Lin Sun. Yi Hongxue smiled valiantly. She was dressed in red and had a straightforward temperament. Lin Sun nodded and said, Why did you have a conflict with the Feather Spirit clan? Yesterday, when we were exploring a mountain range, we inadvertently discovered a 300 long divinity origin crystal or vein. We just dug this or vein away when we were targeted by these winged spirit clan experts. Yi Hongxue was still a little resentful, and told the story again. In short, Yi Hongxue and others were robbed by the strong Feather Spirit clan. Oh no! According to the strong Feather Spirit clan, my brother was probably ambushed on his way to help. Suddenly, Yi Hongxue thought of something and her pretty face changed. Yi Qi? Lin Sun asked. Yi Hongxue nodded quickly. Do you know where he is now? Lin Sun asked. Yes. Lead the way. I'll find him, Lin Sun said without hesitation. The others were refreshed. They had seen Lin Sun's strength just now. It would be great if they could have his help. Immediately, they hurried on their way under the leadership of Yi Hongxue. Originally, Lin Sun wanted to ask some questions about the bloodthirsty battlefield, but seeing Yi Hongshue's worried look, he finally held back. It would not be too late to ask Yi Qi when he saw him. Boom! Before long, a deafening collision sounded from afar. Looking from afar, there was an empty wasteland in the far distance. At this time, there was only a fierce battle on the wasteland. A group of strong Feather Spirit clan was besieging a fat young man in a black robe. Although the young man was round and fat, he was extremely agile. Although he was besieged by a group of strong cultivators, he avoided danger again and again with his ghostly body movements. But everyone could see that he was in danger. "It's my brother," Yi Hongxue said anxiously. Lin Sun also saw it, and he recognized Yi Qi at a glance. After so many years, his body was still as round and fat as before. However, Lin Sun could also see that Yi Qi's cultivation had reached the 6th retribution of longevity. It seems that during the years when I was away, the cultivation of Yi Qi and others who entered the bloodthirsty battlefield also changed dramatically. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Now he finally understood why he didn't see Yi Qi's childhood friends in the Empire. Obviously, they had all come to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Chapter 1440. Elder Brother Lin, please go and save my brother, Yi Hongxue said anxiously. Lin Sun smiled. Don't worry. He can hold on for a while. Honing himself between life and death is very beneficial to his cultivation. As he said, he took out a wine gourd and drank leisurely while watching the battle. Yi Hongxue and others were stunned. Honing himself at this critical moment? What if Yi Qi was killed by accident? Tut tut, no wonder he is so agile and swift. It turns out that he majored in the power of modest wind and thunderbolt. His style is still the same as before. He doesn't seek to defeat the enemy, but only to save his life. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. He recalled his experience in the bloodthirsty camp when he was young. At that time, he and Yi Qi got to know each other through fighting. This fatty's treachery and insidiousness left a deep impression on Lin Sun. After so many years, they met again. Although Yi Qi had set foot on the path of immortality, his fighting style hadn't changed much. He was still as cunning and tricky as before. In the battle in the distance, Yi Qi complained incessantly. He couldn't hold on any longer. Thinking that his sister and others were still waiting for him to rescue them, he became more anxious and angry. Damn it, I'll fight you! Overwhelmed with anger, Yi Qi was about to fight desperately. Suddenly, he noticed that a group of people appeared in the distance. It was his sister Yi Hongxue and others. This delighted Yi Qi. She felt as if a huge stone had been lifted from her heart, and her spirits were suddenly lifted. Now that his sister and others were safe and had come to help him in time, the current predicament would be easily solved. But to Yi Qi's surprise, after waiting for a long time, his sister and others didn't move at all, as if they didn't see that he was in a perilous situation and was about to die. This made him so angry that he almost vomited blood. What made him most angry was that the guy in the lead was still in the mood to drink leisurely. Damn it, who is this guy? Is he here to laugh at me? No, why does this guy look so familiar? Yi Qi was stunned and suddenly recognized him. Lin Sun. It was this guy. Crack, it was precisely because of this moment that a strand of sword qi arrived abruptly, and it tore open a bloody wound on his shoulder that was so deep that bones could be seen. Feeling the pain, Yi Qi's chubby face was full of exasperation. He shouted, Lin Sun, can't you see I'm dying? Still drinking? Aren't you afraid of choking to death? His voice reverberated throughout the world. The experts of the Feather Spirit clan who were besieging him were shocked. When they sensed the existence of Lin Sun and the others, their expressions changed. "You guys continue, don't mind us," Lin Sun responded with a smile. Yi Chi's eyes widened and he roared, "Are you still my friend? We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years, and you plan to watch me get hacked to death the moment you see me?" The expressions of the experts of the Feather Spirit clan were uncertain, but in the end, they gritted their teeth and attacked Yi Chi with all their might. Obviously, they intended to get rid of Yi Chi in the shortest time possible and then think about Lin Sun and the others. Yi Chi's situation suddenly became more and more dangerous. No matter how loudly he shouted, it was of no use. Yi Hongxue was so anxious that he almost burst into tears. He said, "Brother Lin, if you don't want to help, we'll go." Lin Sun stopped smiling and said seriously, Don't you see that his cultivation is on the verge of breaking through the realm? Maybe he can do it in this battle." Yi Hongxue was stunned and doubted. The others were also confused. Was it true? Look, if he is forced into a desperate situation, will he still have the strength to shout? Lin Sun kindly pointed out, under normal circumstances, when facing a life-and-death crisis, no one will have the mind to pay attention to anything else. But look at that fatty. He doesn't look like he is going to be in danger at all. Obviously, he still has strength left, and his potential hasn't been completely revealed. Yi Hongxue and the others observed for a while and found that, as Lin Sun said, Yi Chi was scolding Lin Sun for being heartless and disloyal while fighting, and wanted to break off their friendship. Although he looked very angry, he was also full of energy. Lin Sun took a sip of wine calmly and continued, "Look at those enemies. They look fierce, but their fighting spirit has been shaken. They know that our existence is a great threat, so they have to pay attention to us." Yi Hongxue and the others all nodded. They also noticed this, and the anxiety in their hearts gradually subsided. So, the outcome of this battle has been decided. We just have some more opponents to practice with that fatty. Lin Sun concluded with a smile. "Practice with my ass." In the distance, Yi Chi was so angry that his face twitched and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Lin Sun said with a smile, "Listen, even his scolding is full of vigor. Is that what a dying man should do?" Yi Hongxue couldn't help but remind him loudly, "Brother, you'd better focus on fighting against the enemies. With us here, how can we watch you suffer? You damn girl, it's fine that you don't save your brother, but you're helping him. Do you want to anger your brother to death?" Yi Shaoqi cried out. But soon, he also realized that the situation was dangerous, so he didn't dare to be distracted and concentrated on going all out. Rumble. The battle was fierce, and the weather was changing. The battle between the superiors of the longevity realm could easily burn down mountains and rivers, and the destructive power was amazing. But Lin Sun found that the situation in the bloodthirsty battlefield was a little different. The mountains, rivers, and even the void were covered with an invisible power of order. Under such power of heaven and earth, the destructive power caused by the superiors of the longevity realm was also weakened a lot. Of course, the power was still the same, but it was limited by the law of heaven and earth. It was not that the combat power was suppressed. Perhaps only the power of the superiors of the Saint Realm can create a terrible scene of destruction in this world. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Run! Suddenly, there was a loud shout on the battlefield. The superiors of the Feather Spirit clan didn't succeed in attacking for a long time, so they decisively chose to retreat. Obviously, they realized that running away was the wisest choice in the current situation. "Run? Did I allow you to go?" Yi Chi gnashed his teeth, roared, and chased after them. He was full of anger and hadn't vented it completely. How could he be willing to let the enemy run away like this? Whoosh! Whoosh! But someone acted faster than him. Lin Sun got up, and a stream of sword chi swept out from his body, turning into sharp light and whistling away. Puff, puff, puff. The next moment, the bodies of the superiors of the Feather Spirit clan were mercilessly cut by the sword chi, and their flesh and blood flew everywhere. Yi Chi was stunned for a moment, and then he rushed to Lin Sun angrily, as if he wanted to settle accounts with Lin Sun. Yi Hongxue and the others all changed their expressions, but Lin Sun said indifferently, "You want to fight? Okay, but you should be prepared to be beaten." Yi Chi's dashing figure stopped abruptly, and his expression kept changing. Obviously, he also realized that once he started fighting, he would absolutely be looking for trouble. Didn't he see that a group of superiors of the Feather Spirit clan were killed before they could react? After a while, Yi Chi stared at Lin Sun fiercely and gnashed his teeth. "I haven't seen you for a long time, and you are becoming more and more disgusting. You really don't want to fight with me? If you are angry, just let it out. Don't hold it in," Lin Sun said with a smile. "Bullshit. I'm not a masochist." Yi Chi rolled his eyes. As he spoke, he snatched the gourd from Lin's hand and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Then he exhaled and said grumpily, "Only now do I realize that powerful people can do whatever they want. Take you, for example. You make me hate you so much that I have to endure it." Lin Sun laughed. Yi Hongxue and the others also laughed. They all could see that the relationship between Lin Sun and Yi Chi was not ordinary. "By the way, when did you come to the bloodthirsty battlefield?" Yi Chi asked. "Today." Lin Sun told him the truth. "What?" Yi Hongxue and the others were all stunned. They seemed to be extremely surprised and couldn't believe it. "What's wrong?" Lin Sun said in surprise. "Because the bloodthirsty battlefield has been completely sealed off during these past 10 years, and no one from the outside world has been able to enter. However, you just happened to appear here. This can only prove that someone definitely helped you open up the passageway to this place, and it's not an ordinary person." Yi Chi's expression was strange. Lin Sun suddenly understood and thought of due south. He nodded and said, "The guy who sent me here is indeed not an ordinary person." Yi Chi suddenly smiled and said sneakily, "You have a lot of doubts now, don't you? For example, why has the bloodthirsty battlefield become like this, and why there are so many incredible magic medicines, magic materials, and divine crystals?" Lin Sun said, "Yes. He did have too many questions in his heart. But I won't tell you. I'll let you taste the suffering and the feeling of not being able to get what you want." Yi Chi laughed complacently, as if he had avenged a great hatred. Lin Sun said, "Oh," and stared at Yi Chi faintly, which made Yi Chi's hair stand on end, and the complacent smile on his face became stiff. Yi Chi swallowed his saliva and said, "Are you going to use force? Let me tell you, if you dare to touch a finger of mine, I'll break off all relations with you." "Then I won't touch your finger. What do you think?" Lin Sun said with a smile, and his voice was creepy. Yi Chi's vision darkened. She put her hand to her forehead and said painfully, "How could I forget that you never play by the rules? I give up and admit defeat. I'll tell you everything you want to know, okay?" Lin Sun patted Yi Chi's broad shoulder with a smile and said, "You deserve to be my good brother. You're so loyal." Yi Chi sighed and shook his head. "How can I not be loyal when I meet a ruthless and unscrupulous person like you?" At the end of his words, he couldn't help laughing, as if he had returned to the days when he was a teenager in the bloodthirsty camp. Many years had passed, and they had gone further and further on their respective paths. But how could they forget the friendship they had forged in those days? The road of Tao was arduous and dangerous, and the vicissitudes of life took a long time. He remembered the days when he was a teenager. Chapter 1441. More than a decade ago, the bloodthirsty battlefield had become completely different as a result of the upheaval. Back then, the great emperor of the empire, the empress, the dean of Green Deer Academy, the bloodthirsty King Zhao Tailai, and other important figures of the empire led a group of young disciples into the bloodthirsty battlefield. At that time, the big shots of the 9 voodoo barbarian tribes also arrived here with the most elite young experts of their tribes. Half a year later, in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, a mysterious and terrifying figure called Emperor Qing by many ancient clans opened a dusty ancient formation in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, and opened a passage to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Since then, the bloodthirsty battlefield had become a stage for the three camps of the Empire, the Voodoo Barbarian Alliance, and the Alliance of 10,000 Races. Our Empire's camp is located at the Azure Cloud Mountain, about 13,000 miles away. Bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye is overseeing this place. The Voodoo Barbarian camp, on the other hand, is entrenched in the far west, more than 20,000 kilometers away from the Blue Cloud Mountain. It is overseen by an old monster from the Dark Barbarians called Dark Blood Saint Sorcerer. The Alliance of 10,000 Races is located in the far east, 19,000 kilometers away from the Grey Cloud Mountain. It is overseen by a saint of the Herculean Bull Demons. Yi Qi led Lin Sun and the others to Cloud White Mountain. On the way, Yi Qi told Lin Sun about the situation in the bloodthirsty battlefield. Lin Sun listened silently and couldn't help feeling surprised. Deep in the Soul Oblivion Sea, who was the terrifying figure that many ancient powers called Emperor Qing? To be able to open up a passageway into the bloodthirsty battlefield, this method was indeed terrifying. No wonder he saw the experts of the Feather Spirit clan in the bloodthirsty battlefield just now. The Emperor, Empress, Dean of Green Deer Academy, and the others left together when they arrived at the bloodthirsty battlefield and headed to a place called the Mulberry Forest. When Yi Qi mentioned this, Lin was shocked and asked, "Mulberry Forest?" "Yes. I'm told that it's the real source of chaos, where unimaginably great opportunities and a lot of unpredictable things can be found." Yi Shaoqi said, "It's a pity that it's too terrifying. It's like a forbidden area for those who are below the Saint Realm. Going there is no different from courting death." Lin Sun nodded. Du So had told him about this before he came to the bloodthirsty battlefield. In the Mulberry Forest, sages, great sages, sage kings, and even terrifying existences at the sub-emperor level would exist. It was too terrifying. But Lin Sun didn't expect that the Mulberry Forest was actually the source of chaos. In addition to the great emperor, the bigwigs of the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the Alliance of 10,000 Races also went to the Mulberry Forest. Yi Qi continued, "If it weren't for this, it would have been very difficult for King Realm experts like us, who are on the path to immortality, to survive here." Lin Sun deeply agreed and said, "It's true. For other practitioners, the King Realm is terrifying enough. But in the eyes of sages, the King Realm is just like an ant. If they are here, you're bound to have nothing to do, whether it's doing things or seizing opportunities." "That's right," Yi Qi said with a smile. "Fortunately, these bigwigs have not been here all these years, so we can seize the opportunity to make use of the cultivation resources in the bloodthirsty battlefield. In just over 10 years, a large number of Immortal Realm kings have emerged." Speaking of this, Yi Qi thought of something and couldn't help frowning. The only trouble is that in the bloodthirsty battlefield, there are not only our camp, but also the forces of the other two camps. In recent years, conflicts and killings have broken out frequently in order to compete for various cultivation resources. Alas, now our situation is getting worse and worse. Not only the Voodoo Barbarian camp sees us as a mortal enemy, but also the Alliance of 10,000 Races. Yi Hongshuan next to him also sighed. Have the two camps formed an alliance? Lin Sun was surprised. Yi Qi shook his head. No, the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the Alliance of 10,000 Races have always minded their own business. I see. Lin Sun said thoughtfully. In their eyes, it's obvious that the Empire is easy to bully, so they dare to be so unscrupulous. Speaking of this, he couldn't help wondering, didn't the Empire take any action? The big shots have all gone to the Mulberry Forest. Before they left, according to the agreement, each camp can only leave one sage to guard. Yi Qi explained patiently, that is to say, the competition between the three camps is, in the final analysis, the competition between the King Realm practitioners like us. Lin Sun said with a faint smile, what's the result? Is it that the strong practitioners of the Empire are not as powerful as those of the other two camps? Yi Chi immediately retorted, of course not. Over the years, the strong practitioners of our empire have to fight against the strong practitioners of the voodoo barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races at the same time, and we have suffered a great loss. Yes, two fists can't fight against four hands. In addition, in recent years, in the Taoist mountain debate, the strong practitioners of our empire have been targeted by the other two camps every time, so we have suffered continuous defeats and lost many powerful practitioners, which makes the other two camps more and more arrogant. Yi Hongxue couldn't help saying angrily. Taoist mountain debate? Lin Sun was surprised. Yi Chi explained it to him. It turned out that there was a strange holy mountain in the bloodthirsty battlefield, and there was a stone wall on the cliff platform at the top of the mountain. Every 3 years, dense and obscure carvings of the Great Way would appear on the stone wall of the cliff platform at the top of the mountain. These carvings of the Great Way were extremely magical. Anyone who observed and comprehended them could make his cultivation progress bravely and steadily. Moreover, these carvings of the Great Way had an immeasurable help to break through the realm, which could be called magical. Therefore, this mountain was also called Taoist Mountain. But the strange thing was that these markings of the Grand Tao would only appear once every 3 years, and only one person was able to ascend the cliff every single time to comprehend the markings of the Grand Tao that had appeared on the stone wall. The three camps, the Empire, the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races, fought fiercely for the control of this mountain at the beginning. But in the end, no one could do anything to the other, so they made a rule that every 3 years, a debate would be held in front of Taoist Mountain. The rules of the debate were extremely simple and brutal. At the beginning, the three camps would send their strongest to fight one-on-one. The final winner could climb the mountain and observe the carvings of the Great Way on the stone wall. For the sake of fairness, the winner would lose the qualification for the next debate, and the winner would be chosen by the other two camps. Knowing this, Lin Sun couldn't help asking, "But the Empire has never gained any advantage in the debate?" Yi Chi said with some shame, "That's right." Yi Hongxue said straightforwardly, "In the first debate 16 years ago, the alliance of 10,000 races finally won. 13 years ago, the Voodoo Barbarian camp won. 10 years ago, our empire finally won once. But since then, the two camps have taken turns to win the Taoist mountain debates." Lin Sun was stunned and almost couldn't believe it. The empire only won once? Yi Chi nodded awkwardly and helplessly. But 2 years later, the Taoist mountain debate will be held again. This time, our empire will definitely win. Yi Chi took a deep breath and said resolutely, "Yes, we will definitely win. If nothing goes wrong, Senior Li Duxing will definitely step into the 9th retribution of longevity within 2 years." Yi Hongxue's eyes were filled with a trace of fanaticism and admiration in his voice. The other's eyes were also filled with admiration more or less. Li Duxing. An image of a young man in black with pale skin and reticent emerged in Lin Sun's mind all of a sudden. In the bloodthirsty camp, Li Duxing left a very deep impression on Lin Sun. He was eccentric, reticent, and his expression was like ice that would never melt for thousands of years. He was a man with a sword, and all he did was cultivate. However, Lin Sun knew that although Li Duxing looked cold, he was passionate inside. Because he had drunk with Li Duxing. Li Duxing was a chatterbox when he was drunk. He could be compared with a chatterbox woman. Only a few people, including Lin Sun, Shi Yu and Ning Meng, knew this secret. If Lin Sun remembered correctly, Li Duxing went to the Heiyao shrine to cultivate after leaving the bloodthirsty camp. Because he had an extremely rare talent, the pond of spiritual power, which could evolve the vision of Sword of Darkness. Li Duxing. He is also here. Lin Sun was in a trance. He hadn't seen that eccentric guy for many years. Yi Chi said with a smile, "In addition to Li Duxing, Shi Yu, Ning Meng, and Gong Ming are also here." If they know you are here, they will definitely shout excitedly. In the past, Lin had made many friends in the Empire, but only a few people, such as Shi Yu, Ning Meng, Yi Qi, and Gong Ming, could be regarded as life-and-death friends who had gone through thick and thin with him. They all came from the bloodthirsty camp and experienced many things together in the forbidden city of the Empire. However, they hadn't seen each other for many years since Lin Sun went to the ancient Desolation Realm. Lin Sun originally thought that Shi Yu and Ning Meng also went to the ancient Desolation Realm, but now he knew that they all came to the bloodthirsty battlefield. Look, that's the misty cloud mountain, the camp of our empire. A quarter of an hour later, Yi Qi pointed to the front and said with relief. He felt relaxed. Lin Sun raised his eyes and saw a majestic mountain surrounded by purple qi on the distant horizon. It stood between heaven and earth, like the backbone of the sky, which was spectacular. Compared with the other mountains nearby, it suddenly seemed very inconspicuous. The misty cloud mountain. With Lin's eyesight, the mountain shrouded in auspicious purple qi was simply a sacred place, divine and unearthly. There were many famous mountains and blessed lands in the upper 9 regions of the absolute top domain, but they were obviously inferior to the misty cloud mountain. The bloodthirsty battlefield was really extraordinary. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. However, when they arrived at the misty cloud mountain, they heard the bad news at the first time. Li Duxing was ambushed and was seriously injured. Chapter 1442. Cloud White Mountain. Green pines, green cypresses, waterfalls, and flowing springs. Purple spiritual qi poured down from the cliff like a purple dragon hanging upside down. This was a first-class blessed land, like a sacred residence. But at this time, Cloud White Mountain was shrouded in a shadow. Li Duxing returned seriously injured, and fell into a coma as soon as he arrived at the camp. He was second to none in the camp of the Empire, and had reached the 8th retribution of longevity. He was destined to enter the 9th retribution of longevity in 2 years. If there was no accident, Li Duxing would go to the Taoist mountain as the last man of the Empire in 2 years. But the accident happened today. This is a conspiracy. It must be the evil plan of the alliance of 10,000 races. Everyone knows that Li Duxing is the key figure on our side in the Taoist mountain 2 years later. Angry voices were everywhere on Cloud White Mountain. When Lin Sun and Yi Qi returned, they saw such a scene. Li Duxing was injured. Lin couldn't help frowning. Yi Qi said angrily, "Needless to say, it must be the alliance of 10,000 races. Weren't we ambushed by the Feather Spirit clan on our way back?" Yi Hongxue and the others nodded. Lin said, "It's useless to talk about it now. Let's go and see Li Duxing first." Okay. Yi Qi nodded. On the mountainside of Cloud White Mountain, there were rows of buildings made of huge hard rock. In front of one of the palaces, there were many young men and women, but their qi was more powerful than the other. The weakest one was in the 2nd retribution of longevity. In the Empire, this was a terrible force that could deter the world, but it was very common in the bloodthirsty battlefield. "Brother Qin, how is Li Duxing? Has he woken up? Brother Qin, did he tell us who the murderer is?" There was a lot of noise. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Some were angry, some were gloomy, and some were worried and anxious. But at this time, many people looked at one person at the same time. That person stood at the front of the hall. He wore a golden robe, a tall hat, and a wide belt. He had a handsome appearance, and he was steady and composed. There were a few men accompanying him by his side, causing him to seem like a crane amongst chickens. He was Qin Feiyu. In the Azure Cloud Mountain Empire's camp, not only were they extremely powerful, but they were also highly respected. Qin Feiyu said loudly, "Don't worry. I'll inform you as soon as I have any news." "Can we go in and see fellow Taoist Li?" someone asked. Qin Feiyu shook his head and said seriously, "At this critical moment, Li Duxing needs to heal and recover, not to visit him. You'd better go back." If Zhao Jinglin and the others can enter, why can't we? Someone snorted coldly. Qin Feiyu looked up and found it was Ning Meng, the grandson of Blood King Ning Buguit. He frowned and said unhappily, "They are here to heal Li Duxing. You'd better not make trouble." Ning Meng flew into a rage. "You say I'm making trouble? I suspect that you are making trouble for me. Everyone knows that Li Duxing hates you the most. But now you're controlling this place and hypocritically saying that you're going to heal him. This is clearly a case of a weasel paying respects to a chicken. You're up to no good." The crowd became restless. Many people smiled bitterly. Ning Meng was the most hot-tempered and overbearing. He was not on the same side as Qin Feiyu. Over the past 10 years, they had fought openly and secretly for many times. Everyone knew that Ning Meng and Qin Feiyu disliked each other. "Ning Meng, don't make trouble at this critical moment." Qin Feiyu's face darkened and his eyes became cold. He said, "I'll tolerate you at other times. But if you dare to make trouble at this moment, don't blame me for being rude." Ning Meng suddenly stood out. His majestic figure was like a hill, giving people an oppressive feeling. He said coldly, "Rude? Come on, I'd like to see how you'll be rude. I'm not afraid to tell you that whoever dares to stop me today will be my enemy." As he said, he strode forward. Qin Feiyu's face darkened. He waved his hand and said, "You guys come together and drive this rude guy away." Beside him, a group of men and women stood out with unkind expressions. "Group attack? You really think highly of your grandpa Ning. But these guys are not enough." Ning Meng was disdainful, and his power became more and more oppressive. "What if I join you?" Qin Feiyu said coldly. "Neither can you," Ning Meng said without hesitation. Others may be afraid of you, Ning Meng, but I'm not. Get out of here." Suddenly, a figure rushed out of the hall like a bloody thunder. With a roar, he rushed out with a terrible breath of destruction and slapped Ning Meng with his palm. It was a red-robed young man with a violent breath and a fierce look. He was extremely domineering and took action directly. There was an exclamation in the hall and the crowd dispersed. "The seventh prince, Zhao Jingfeng." Ning Meng narrowed his eyes and showed a dignified look. He waved his palm to resist the attack without hesitation. Boom! In the terrible collision sound, Ning Meng stepped back a few steps. His face turned blue and white, which made him look very ugly. At the same time, Zhao Jingfeng in a red robe landed on the ground and said with a grim look, "Get out of here, or do you want me to continue?" There was a silence in the hall. Many people showed fear. Zhao Jingfeng was the most ferocious among the princes of the empire. His combat capability was also extremely swift and fierce, and he was the coldest. "Get out of here! You don't know what's good for you. You want the seventh prince to do it himself. Aren't you asking to be humiliated?" Qin Feiyu and others sneered with mockery on their faces. Ning Meng's face was gloomy. He said angrily, "I've said that whoever doesn't let me in today is my enemy." He took a deep breath, and his eyes were full of fighting intent. Indeed, he knew that he was no match for Zhao Jingfeng, but he had to come. The reason was simple. Li Duxing was his brother. Sure Yu, Gong Ming, and Yi Qi hadn't come back yet. He was the only one left on the Cloud Mountain. At this moment, he couldn't flinch. "I told you to get out of here, but you don't accept it. Kneel here and repent." Zhao Jingfeng's eyes flashed fiercely, and his whole body emitted a violent breath like an angry ancient fierce beast. Boom! As he spoke, he rushed out without hesitation. Blood-colored thunderbolts were rolling around him, and his power was terrible. He slapped Ning Meng again. That palm strike was powerful and overbearing, and it flowed with the laws. It was extremely ferocious and world-shocking. It was like a blood-colored bolt of lightning had struck down, and it was a horrifying sight. Some people couldn't help but dodge. They were worried that they would be affected by the horrible oppression. Some people couldn't bear it and sighed in their hearts. Why did he do that? Was the seventh prince someone anyone could provoke? Qin Feiyu and others were sneering. Ning Meng was indeed a brainless boor. How dare he fight against the seventh prince? He was absolutely reckless. At the same time, Ning Meng also felt great pressure, but he didn't flinch. Instead, an unprecedented determination appeared on his face. He couldn't retreat, because he didn't trust Qin Feiyu and others, and he didn't believe that they would be kind enough to heal Li Duxing. He even suspected that Qin Feiyu and others had ulterior motives to harm Li Duxing, who was seriously injured and in a coma. As a brother, how could he retreat at this moment? Boom! The void was rolling violently, producing a deafening roar. Zhao Jingfeng's palm had arrived. When Ning Meng gathered all his strength and was about to launch an attack, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Crack! Then, an incomparably crisp slap rang out. Everyone heard it loud and clear. Immediately, people saw that the fierce and violent Zhao Jingfeng was directly slapped away. He rolled on the ground like a gourd and fell in front of the steps in front of the hall. The impact made the steps crack. It could be imagined how powerful the slap was. Zhao Jingxuan's mouth and nose were bleeding, his cheeks were red and swollen, and his hair was disheveled. He was in a mess. There was a dead silence. People nearby changed their expressions. Who was so bold to slap the seventh prince? And the strength was so great, the mocking smile on Qin Feiyu and others' faces froze. They couldn't believe it. Therefore, all eyes turned to the uninvited guest at the same time. That was a young man dressed in moon-white clothes. He stood in front of Ning Meng with a tall figure. Who was this? Many people were stunned because it was the first time for them to see such a strange face in the camp in more than 10 years. Some people felt familiar and soon recognized the identity of the newcomer. But they couldn't believe it and opened their eyes wide. Ning Meng was also stunned. Looking at the back of the person in front of him, he blurted out, "Dude, you can't get involved in this. You'd better leave now." "Idiot. Look who he is." Yi Qi came out of nowhere and patted Ning Meng on the shoulder. Ning Meng was stunned. At this time, Lin Sun turned around and said with a smile, "If I leave, who will help you?" Motherf *Ker, Motherf *Ker. Suddenly, Ning Meng's eyes almost fell out. He was so excited that he screamed, "It's you! How could it be possible? Why did you suddenly appear?" The surprise came so unexpectedly that he almost jumped up. "You still talk as much as before." Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. At this time, Qin Feiyu and others were surprised and doubtful. They didn't know Lin Sun, but they could see that Lin Sun and Ning Meng had a good relationship. Zhao Jingfeng, who got up from the ground, had a terrible livid face. His eyes were burning with the flames of violence and anger. "How dare you sneak attack me? I'll kill you!" He gritted his teeth and let out a roar. Then he rushed out again and ran all the combat power belonging to the seventh retribution of Longevity Realm. At first glance, he was like a blood-red thunder with a shocking destructive aura. Everyone knew that the seventh prince was furious. At this time, he was the most terrible. Watch out! At this time, Lin Sun's back was facing Zhao Jingfeng, which made Ning Meng's heart suddenly tighten. He was about to warn Ning Meng, but before he could say anything, he was interrupted by a crisp slap. Chapter 1443. Crack! The slap was so loud that it made the people around tremble and feel the pain. The ferocious Zhao Jingfeng was once again sent flying by a slap. This time, he was smashed on the stone pillar of the palace. His head was swollen like a pig's head, and blood was flowing out of his mouth and nose. It was a horrible sight. Hiss! Many people gasped in horror. The corners of Qin Feiyu's mouth twitched fiercely. They were all horrified. Zhao Jingfeng, the seventh prince, was an extremely ferocious man with the combat capability of the seventh retribution of Longevity Realm. In the camp of the Empire, he could rank in the top 5. But now, he was slapped away twice in a row. The slap was so loud that it made people panic. The most terrible thing was that his opponent was calm and relaxed from beginning to end. It was obvious that he didn't use his real strength at all. This undoubtedly proved that the opponent was very strong, and not just an ordinary kind of strong. Even Ning Meng and Yi Qi felt dizzy because they knew how powerful Zhao Jingfeng, the seventh prince, was. But he was nothing in Lin Sun's hands. "Let's go. I'm afraid that Li Duxing will be plotted against," Ning Meng shouted suddenly. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and stopped thinking about it. He walked toward the hall. Before he arrived here, he had already covered this place with his spiritual awareness and saw everything that happened. Seeing Ning Meng's anxious look, Lin Sun knew something was wrong. "Get out!" Lin Sun glanced at Qin Feiyu and others who were still blocking in front of the hall, and spat out a word. It was just a word, but it exploded in the hearts of Qin Feiyu and others, making their souls tremble and seeing stars. They were so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood. Almost instinctively they staggered out of the way. When Qin Feiyu and others came to their senses, Lin Sun had already entered the hall with Ning Meng and Yi Qi. This made them angry, and scared. Their faces turned blue and white, and they felt terrible. Who on earth was this guy? Seeing this, other people nearby couldn't help but be shocked. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would be so powerful. Plop! Zhao Jingfeng, who had been smashed into the stone pillar, fell limply to the ground. He was obviously knocked unconscious, but he still gritted his teeth and said in a hoarse voice, "No matter who he is, I want to kill him. I must kill him." Silence reigned. Someone couldn't help but remind, "Your Highness, that man is very likely to be Lin Sun." "Lin Sun?" Qin Feiyu was stunned. "I said, no matter who he is, I must," Zhao Jingfeng roared with a ferocious face. But halfway through his words, he seemed to realize something and suddenly said, "You said he is Lin Sun? Is he the master of heart-cleansing peak of Lin family?" Many people nodded. Qin Feiyu and the others also came to themselves, and their expressions changed. "That's impossible. Didn't he go to the ancient Desolation Realm more than 10 years ago?" "Yes, why did Lin Sun appear?" The others were also puzzled. It should be known that the passageway to the bloodthirsty battlefield had been closed for more than 10 years, and no one had been able to enter. How did Lin Sun come here? "So it's him. Damn it!" Zhao Jingfeng's voice was low and full of resentment, as if it was squeezed out from his chest. Being slapped so miserably by Lin Sun under the watchful eyes of the public was absolutely a great shame, which made him feel so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to hide himself in. Shit! Suddenly, Zhao Jingfeng's face changed. He thought of something and roared, "Hurry up! Stop them! We can't let them ruin my second brother's plan." Qin Feiyu and the others were all confused. Wasn't the second prince Zhao Jinglin healing Li Duxing? Although they were confused, they didn't dare to refuse and rushed into the hall. The others present looked at each other and vaguely felt that something was wrong. In a closed room deep in the hall, Li Duxing fainted and lay motionless on the bed. His pale face turned red. Buzz! In front of the bed, 13 strange dark green bells were floating in the air, each of them emitting a heart-palpitating green halo. Zhao Jinglin was dressed in a bright yellow dragon robe. Under the illumination of the emerald-green halo, his fair and handsome face was suffused with a touch of strange green. He looked calm. Looking at Li Duxing on the bed, he said, "Don't worry. I will help you recover. Besides, I won't hurt your cultivation. I promise you can participate in the contest in Taoist Mountain 2 years later." As he spoke, he made a gesture with his palm. Clatter! The 13 turquoise bells suddenly swayed, sprinkling green clouds like waves, which covered Li Duxing on the bed like a torrent. Boom! But at the same time, the closed door suddenly burst, and Lin Sun's figure showed up. When he saw this scene, his face changed slightly. "Who let you in? Get out!" Zhao Jinglin shouted, and his face suddenly became gloomy. While speaking, he didn't stop what he was doing. Lin Sun snorted and waved his sleeves. A gust of Taoist light swept out like a gust of wind. The 13 green bells floating in the air suddenly made a loud noise and were on the verge of falling. "You're courting death." Zhao Jinglin's face suddenly became gloomy, and he slapped Lin Sun with his palm. "Kneel down first." Lin Sun stepped forward, and without dodging, he also pressed his palm. There was no collision at all. Like a candle in the wind, Zhao Jinglin's palm went out in an instant, and he was slapped to the ground by Lin Sun's palm. Bang! Zhao Jinglin knelt on the ground, which made the house shake violently. In an instant, his eyes turned red with anger. "Who are you? How dare you break into this place to commit murder? Aren't you afraid of death?" Lin Sun ignored him directly. He raised his hand and grabbed the 13 green bells. After looking at them for a while, a cold and gloomy spirit came to his face, which made Lin Sun's eyes narrow. What kind of treasure was this? How could its power be so weird? Boom! While thinking, Lin Sun's body glowed, and he raised his hand to suppress the green bells. Then he looked at Zhao Jinglin on the ground. "Tell me, what are you doing? Idiot, are you blind? Can't you see that I'm healing Li Duxing?" Zhao Jinglin roared angrily, as if he was wronged. Lin Sun sneered, and his eyes were deep. He said, "I gave you a chance, but you didn't take it. In that case, don't blame me." Zhao Jinglin's face changed, and he seemed to realize that something was wrong. He struggled to get up and shouted, "What do you want to do? This is the core of the empire. I'm the second prince, Zhao Jinglin." In the middle of his words, his voice was interrupted by Lin Sun's terrible palm. "How dare you?" Zhao Jinglin seemed to have gone completely mad. A scarlet red eye suddenly flashed out from between his brows, and it was like the eye of a primeval demon god. It surged with a strange and scarlet-red divine glow, and the phenomenon of ghosts wailing and gods howling and the sun sinking and moon being destroyed was faintly reflected within the scarlet-red eye. In an instant, Lin Sun, with his current spiritual power, felt a palpitation and a cold and terrible threat. "Master, this is the blood pupil of the evil centipede. It's extremely evil. Let me deal with it." Almost at the same time, Little Silver rushed out. Swish! A nearly invisible sword edge swept out of Little Silver's palm and flashed in the void. With a puff, the silver light burst out. The strange scarlet eye was directly pierced by the sword chi, and a string of black and smelly blood flowed out. Zhao Jinglin, as if he had suffered a backfire, suddenly let out a painful roar. His body cracked inch by inch, his skin and bones peeled off, and his flesh and blood fell down. In an instant, a living man, a strong practitioner in the longevity tribulation realm, turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked by this strange scene. "Where are you going?" At this time, Little Silver rushed forward with a cold and handsome look, wielding his sword to kill. Humph! The pierced scarlet eye let out a cold snort. It seemed to be extremely angry, and turned around to escape. But no matter how fast it couldn't be faster than Little Silver's sword. In an instant, the scarlet eye was cut into two and exploded in the void. However, the strange thing was that although the scarlet pupil had been destroyed, a cold and ethereal voice rang out. "Some eyes won't disappear. No matter where you are and what you are doing, I can see it. You will die sooner or later." The voice gradually turned into nothingness and disappeared completely. "Master, this is the means of the evil demonic spirit tribe. This tribe is best at occupying and controlling the mind of others with the skill of soul. Those controlled by them are called servants of evil demonic spirit, but in fact their lives have been taken away." Little Silver's expression was solemn as he frowned. It's very obvious that Zhao Jinglin's mind and body have long since been occupied by an expert of the evil demonic spirit clan, and he's been reduced to a servant of the evil demonic spirit. In a situation like this, it would be very difficult for even a saint to discover unless they carefully probed. Looking at the pool of blood on the ground, Lin Sun's expression was uncertain, and he asked, "What are these bells used for?" Little Silver glanced at them and said directly, "Soul Catcher, these are soul-planting bells, which can occupy the mind of others silently, control them, and turn them into servants of evil demonic spirit." A chill ran down Lin Sun's spine, and he secretly rejoiced that if he came a little later, Li Duxing, who was in a coma on the bed, would have been killed. Damn it, so the second prince is no longer the second prince? I just felt that something was wrong. It turns out that something is really King wrong. Seeing all this, Ning Meng gnashed his teeth in anger. "Do you know the evil demonic spirit tribe?" Lin Sun asked. Ning Meng shook his head. "I've never heard of it before, but I feel that it must be the people of the Alliance of 10,000 races. There are many strong people in the Alliance, and there are all kinds of ghosts." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly and thought that the Taoist Mountain contest in 2 years would be held between the Empire and the Alliance of 10,000 races. Now, not only the second prince, Zhao Jinglin, but also Li Duxing would be killed. There was no doubt that if these things really happened, the Alliance of 10,000 races would be the biggest beneficiary. At this time, Qin Feiyu and a group of people rushed over. When they saw the scene in the room, they couldn't help being stunned. Especially when they saw the pool of blood on the ground, Qin Feiyu and others immediately changed their faces and shouted angrily, "You killed the second prince?" Chapter 1444. Seeing that Qin Feiyu and others were so angry as if their parents had died, Ning Meng couldn't help laughing out of extreme anger. "Idiot, he died by himself." Hearing this, Qin Feiyu felt that his intelligence was insulted. He said with a livid face, "Died by himself? A strong practitioner in the 7th retribution of longevity would die by himself? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Then he stared at Lin Sun, Ning Meng, Yi Qi and others angrily and said, "The second prince was kind enough to cure Li Duxing, but you despicably killed him. You are so evil and unforgivable." Outside the hall, many experts of the Empire were surprised and bewildered, and they heard the furious roars from within clearly, causing them to be extremely astounded in their hearts. The second prince, Zhao Jinglin, was killed by Lin Sun? That was too fierce. Especially the 7th prince, Zhao Jingfeng, whose eyes widened and body trembled. That guy even killed his second brother? For the Empire, the status of the princes was extremely respected. Even though their strength might not be as good as other strong practitioners, their status alone was enough to make others respect them. But now Lin Sun not only slapped Zhao Jingfeng twice, but also killed the second prince, Zhao Jinglin. "Why are you still standing there? Go and kill the thug!" Zhao Jingfeng roared. Seeing this, the other strong practitioners looked uncertain. When they were about to take action, a cold snort sounded. "Stay where you are." That voice was like a thunderclap of the Grand Tao, and it caused everyone present to tremble. In the void, a slender and beautiful woman in a black crane cloak came through the void. Bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye. All the people present showed awe and respect. They all clearly remembered that more than 10 years ago, in the bloodthirsty battlefield, bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye, under the protection of a group of big shots, passed the great tribulation of sanctification and became a real sage. In the past 10 years, it was because of Zhao Xingye that the Empire was able to compete with the voodoo barbarians and the alliance of 10,000 races. "Aunt, you're finally back. Lin Sun killed my second brother. You must avenge him. You can't spare that bastard Lin Sun." Zhao Jingfeng yelled, his face filled with grief and indignation. Zhao Xingye glanced at him and said, "What a disgrace." Then, he strode into the main hall, leaving behind a completely dumbfounded Zhao Jingfeng. The others heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. Now that Zhao Xingye was here, things would definitely be solved. If Lin Sun was really so vicious, he would definitely be punished. At this moment, in the depths of the hall, Ning Meng was also angry, unforgivable? "How dare you? If we hadn't arrived in time, Li Duxing would have been killed by this guy." Qin Feiyu looked gloomy. "How dare you quibble? Let's see what you can say when Prince Zhao Xingye comes back. Let me tell you, the second prince is dead. Just wait for your punishment. Ignorant! Lin Sun didn't bother to explain. Qin Feiyu widened his eyes and pointed at himself. You're a murderer. How dare you say that I'm ignorant? Very ignorant indeed. This time, it was not Lin Sun who spoke, but Zhao Xingye who walked into the hall. As soon as he arrived, he became the focus of attention. However, Qin Feiyu looked very aggrieved and shocked. Why did Prince Zhao Xingye say so? Didn't she see that the second Prince Zhao Jinglin was killed? When he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Zhao Xingye. You all go out. I have something to ask Lin Sun. Ning Meng and Yi Qi naturally had no objection. They cupped their hands and turned to leave. Qin Feiyu and the others were stunned and vaguely felt that something was wrong. However, when they saw Zhao Xingye's cold eyes, they only felt cold all over and did not dare to say anything more. They left with a bellyful of surprise and anger. For a moment, there were only Zhao Xingye, Lin Sun and Li Duxing in a coma in the room. I've just come back. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. Zhao Xingye sighed softly. Her waterfall-like black hair was tied up in a bun, revealing a white and slender goose neck. Her red lips were full, her nose was high, her eyes were big and full of spirit, and her eyebrows were as straight as ink. The outline of her face was so exquisite that it was breathtaking. But if you looked carefully, you would find that there were all kinds of terrible visions surging in her charming eyes, which seemed to be able to devour and tear people's souls into pieces. It was extremely frightening. In the past, Lin Sun knew that Zhao Xingye was extremely terrible. Now Lin Sun was already at the top of the 8th retribution of longevity. But when facing Zhao Xingye, he still felt a kind of unfathomable and lofty aura. This made him realize that Zhao Xingye had become a true sage. A mere practitioner of the 9th retribution of longevity couldn't sit in the camp of the Empire, nor could he bring a sense of oppression to Lin Sun. Lin Sun said, I didn't kill him. I know. Zhao Xingye glanced at Lin Sun and said, I went out to investigate the cause of Li Duxing's injury. Do you know what I found? Lin Sun said, Please give me some advice. The one who seriously injured Li Duxing was probably a master of the dark barbarian branch in the voodoo barbarian camp, who used a secret method to paralyze and corrode the soul. Zhao Xingye said, This secret method is not very powerful, but it can make people fall into a coma and lose consciousness for a period of time. It's not done by the alliance of 10,000 races? Lin Sun was surprised. You also realize that something is wrong? Zhao Xingye's eyes were terrifyingly cold. This can only prove that the two camps have reached some kind of consensus in secret, or have very likely started to cooperate. The second prince was turned into the servant of evil demon by the alliance of 10,000 races, and Li Duxing was seriously injured by the voodoo barbarian camp. Now, the second prince is going to further occupy and control Li Duxing's mind under the guise of healing Li Duxing and turn him into the servant of evil demon, Lin Sun murmured. It seems that the two camps have indeed colluded with each other. So, the situation of our empire is likely to get worse and worse in the future. Zhao Xingye said, I can't change this kind of thing. It can only depend on you young disciples to compete and fight with each other. Lin Sun understood what Zhao Xingye meant. Each of the three camps had a figure of the Saint Realm, which restrained each other. No one dared to act rashly unless there was a life-and-death crisis. If Zhao Xingye desperately fought against the enemy because of the second prince's death and Li Duxing's serious injury, the Empire's camp could not bear the consequences. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh. It seems that the situation of the Empire's camp is worse than I expected. Zhao Xingye laughed at this time. Fortunately, you are here. When the Emperor left more than 10 years ago, he said that you would definitely come back. Lin Sun was stunned and then smiled bitterly. Senior, don't you overestimate me? Zhao Xingye snorted. If you can't even solve this little trouble, how can you go to the mulberry forest? Or, you don't want to contribute to the empire? Just when Lin Sun was about to say something, he was interrupted by Zhao Xingye, who pointed to Li Duxing on the bed. He is your friend. Now he is set up and seriously injured. Can you really sit back and do nothing? But, no buts. Zhao Xingye interrupted Lin Sun again, with an intoxicating smile on her charming face. The second prince is in trouble. You really don't want to be regarded as a murderer, do you? Her voice was soft and hoarse, with an indescribable flirtatious charm. But Lin Sun broke into a cold sweat and said with a bitter smile, I didn't say that I won't help. Zhao Xingye sighed faintly. Are you in a dilemma? You don't understand how unhappy I am. The Empire is now bullied by the voodoo barbarians and the aliens of the alliance of 10,000 races. It's so annoying. Immediately, she changed the topic and said with a lonely look, If you really don't want to help, I won't force you. Everyone has his own ambition, and you can't force him. Lin Sun felt uncomfortable all over and immediately said happily, Senior, don't worry. I won't stand back and do nothing. Zhao Xingye stretched out a slender hand, patted Lin Sun on the shoulder, and said with relief, Not only will you not stand back and do nothing, but you will also fight for the prestige of our empire. It's better to kill all the bastards of the two camps. At the end of his words, there was a trace of cruelty in his voice, which made Lin Sun realize that Zhao Xingye was indeed suppressing a ball of fire in her heart. It could be imagined how bad the performance of the Empire's camp was in these years, which could make a sage so angry. 2 years later, the Taoist Mountain Contest will be held again. At that time, we and the alliance of 10,000 races will each select 10 disciples to participate in the contest. You will also participate. Zhao Xingye said, In the past, our empire lost more than we won in the Taoist Mountain Contest. Every time we lost some of the best overmatches. This time, I hope you can change the situation. Okay. Since Lin Sun promised, he couldn't refuse. Whether it was to avenge Li Duxing or to fight for the empire, he couldn't refuse. Zhao Xingye looked at Lin Sun with a smile, full of expectation, as if he was looking at a rare treasure. He said, Well, as long as you win beautifully, I will personally send you to the mulberry forest. As for Li Duxing, I will help you cure his injury. Hearing this, Lin Sun was completely relieved. On this day, Lin Sun arrived at the Cloud Mountain, slapped the 7th prince Zhao Jingfeng, and revealed the 2nd prince Zhao Jinglin's identity as the servant of the evil demon, which caused an uproar and shock. The most stunning thing was that His Highness Zhao Xingye, the leader of the Empire's camp, personally held a grand banquet to welcome Lin Sun. This made everyone realize that Lin Sun's position in Zhao Xingye's heart was far more important than they imagined. As for Qin Feiyu and the others, they all looked gloomy and depressed. They all realized that it was impossible for them to compete with Ning Meng, Yi Qi, and the others openly and covertly as before. It was not only because the 2nd prince Zhao Jinglin, the leader of their force, was dead, but most importantly Lin Sun came. He alone was enough to make them unable to breathe. Even Zhao Jingfeng, the 7th prince, couldn't withstand 2 slaps from Lin Sun. Chapter 1445. Cheers! Shouts rang out in the night, and then glasses collided with each other. The amber wine rippled and emitted a strong aroma. In a brightly lit palace on Cloud Mountain, Lin Sun, Ning Meng, Shi Yu, Yi Qi, Gong Ming, and other friends who had made deep friendships since they were young gathered together. The ground was already piled with empty wine jars. In the main hall, everyone's eyes were dazzled and their ears were hot, and they chatted happily. It was the 4th day since Lin Sun came to Cloud Mountain. During the conversation, Lin Sun also learned that Shi Yu and Ning Meng had gone to the ancient Desolation Realm, but they were stopped by a decree of the Emperor. Not only them, but also some elite disciples of the imperial forces, Green Deer School, Bloodthirsty Camp, and the army failed to go to the ancient Desolation Realm. Instead, they were sent to the bloodthirsty battlefield. We left in a hurry at that time, and it was a secret of the Empire, so we didn't tell you in advance. Sure, you sighed with emotion, but I didn't expect that after more than 10 years, we brothers finally reunited here. It's really sad. It reminds me of a poem. Stop. I don't want to hear you recite poems. Drink, drink. Ning Meng shouted. Sure, you rolled his eyes and said grumpily, vulgar? The others all laughed. It's a pity that Li Duxing hasn't woken up yet, Gong Ming sighed. His words made the atmosphere in the hall a little heavy. Damn it, if I know who did it, I'll kill him. Ning Meng gnashed his teeth. The others were also full of killing intent. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and said, We must avenge him. Late at night, Lin Sun stood in front of a stone house on the side of the mountain top. This was his residence, from which he could overlook the mountains in the far distance. The night was dark. Cloud Mountain was flowing with auspicious purple clouds, isolating the night. What on earth is hidden in the night? Lin Sun frowned. When he entered the bloodthirsty battlefield for the first time, there was a rule that he must return to the camp before dark. Otherwise, he would encounter great danger. This was an iron rule that no one dared to disobey. Now, after many years, Lin Sun came again, but he didn't expect that the rule of don't go out at dark was still maintained. Moreover, no one dared to cross the line. It was as if there was an unimaginable terror in the dark night. The bloodthirsty battlefield is an extremely mysterious place. There are many different opinions about its origin. So far, no one has been able to give a clear answer. It was unknown when bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye had arrived. She stood beside Lin Sun, gazing at the night in the distance with her deep and bright eyes. For example, the bloodthirsty battlefield in the daytime is completely different from the bloodthirsty battlefield at night. They're like two different worlds, Zhao Xingye said. During the day, the bloodthirsty battlefield is like the world of the living. Nothing strange or dangerous will happen. At night, the bloodthirsty battlefield seems to have fallen into the netherworld. Strange and ominous things come one after another. Danger is unpredictable. I didn't understand it in the past, and now I don't understand it at all, Zhao Xingye sighed softly. It was obvious that she had been thinking about this problem as well. But one thing is certain. Even a saint can't act on his own at night, because there are terrifying dangers that can kill a saint in the darkness. Lin Sun couldn't help but ask, Senior, have you investigated it before? Zhao Xingye shook his head. The martial emperor and the monarch empress have investigated, and they immediately returned to the campsite within the time it takes to finish a cup of tea. Their expressions were solemn and filled with bewilderment. I never thought that they would lose their composure despite their strength. What did they see? Lin Sun was curious. Zhao Xingye was silent for a moment and then said, The great emperor once said that the bloodthirsty battlefield at night has become completely different from the daytime. It's like a strange world, very much like the netherworld in the legendary netherworld. Her voice was low, drifting in the night. Lin Sun felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. When he looked at the night in the distance again, his eyes had become different. The netherworld? Did this kind of place that only existed in the illusory legends really exist? So, I advise you not to leave the camp at night, even if you have a lot of trump cards in your hands. I've seen many people who don't believe in heresy do this, both in the past and now, but there's only one result. When Zhao Xingye said this, there was a rare trace of fear in her eyes. What? Disappear? Zhao Xingye said. They disappear silently and never come back. Even if you look for them in the daytime, you can't find any trace, not even a trace of aura. You should know that with my means, even if it's one of the 4 people who have been erased, as long as there's a trace of aura left, I can catch it. Unfortunately, I've never found a person who got lost in the night. Not even one. Lin Sun asked again, as if he wanted to confirm. No. Zhao Xingye answered without hesitation. Lin Sun's eyes flashed, and he was shocked. When the night fell, would the bloodthirsty battlefield really become a strange world like hell? Lin Sun was still thinking about this problem when Zhao Xingye left and he returned to his room. In the end, he shook his head and completely suppressed the curiosity in his heart. He didn't want to try it at the risk of his life. Of course, if there was a chance in the future, he wouldn't mind to investigate it. At the same time, in the heaven accessing place, the mysterious woman sitting under the gate of heaven was also lost in thought. With the day and night as the boundary, yin and yang coexist? She got up and seemed to do something. But right after that, her eyes focused and revealed an expression of surprise. She seemed to have sensed something and muttered, "What a strange power. It's actually able to isolate my detection. Could it be that there really is another world in this darkness? Only the supreme power of the world's laws could stop her from probing. Interesting. I'd like to see what's hidden in the night." While thinking, the mysterious woman's figure suddenly turned into a light rain and disappeared in the heaven accessing place. Lin Sun didn't notice it at all. After returning to his room, he began to concentrate on cultivation. Whoosh along with his breathing, the surging tide of purple spiritual energy was like a great river, rumbling and converging towards the room he was in from all directions. The surging spiritual energy was so vigorous and pure that it was shocking. On his way to Misty Cloud Mountain, Lin Sun had tried to cultivate in some beautiful mountains, and he was surprised by the richness of the spiritual qi there. But in Misty Cloud Mountain, the spiritual qi was not only abundant but also amazingly pure, which was far from being comparable to other places. It was a sacred blessed land that was hard to find in the outside world. If I cultivate here, then I wonder to what level my body refinement cultivation will be able to improve to before the Tao Observation Mountain competition begins 2 years from now. Chen Shi muttered to himself. Lin Sun couldn't help shaking his head after thinking about it. The promotion of cultivation couldn't be fast or unstable, but the priority was to make progress steadily. Otherwise, it would be like a castle in the air, which would make the Taoist foundation unstable. From that day on, Lin Sun stayed on Cloud Mountain, devoting himself to the cultivation of body refining and living in seclusion. Occasionally, he would drink and chat with Ning Meng, Shi Yu, and Yi Qi. But most of his time and energy were spent on cultivation. Zhao Xingye didn't say anything about it. He even ordered to send 50 kilograms of divine crystals to Lin Sun every 7 days to supplement his cultivation. Many strong people of the empire felt it was unfair. They thought Zhao Xingye was partial and attached too much importance to Lin Sun. Divine crystals weren't cabbages that could be obtained easily. Even in the bloodthirsty battlefield, it was hard to get them. They were rare resources in cultivation and their value was immeasurable. In the camp of the Empire, every strong person was responsible for collecting divine crystals, and 20% of them needed to be handed over to the camp as strategic reserve. But Lin Sun was different. Since he entered the camp, he had been drinking in addition to cultivation. The divine crystals needed for cultivation were the strategic materials stored in the camp, which naturally made people feel unbalanced. We worked hard and risked our lives to collect divine crystals. Why should Lin Sun enjoy them? Since he entered the camp, he hasn't helped the camp. It's so annoying. These discussions happened more and more as time went by. The dissatisfaction in the hearts of the strong people of the empire accumulated little by little and became more and more, but what made them helpless was that Lin Sun almost stayed in the house on the top of the mountain and never went out, so they couldn't seize the opportunity to ridicule and criticize him. Naturally, they couldn't vent their dissatisfaction. Moreover, Zhao Xingye was well aware of this, but he never thought of changing this situation. This kind of lenient attitude towards Lin Sun made many people choke back their anger. Shi Yu and Ning Meng also knew these things, and they all sniggered secretly. Of course, they wouldn't be unhappy that Lin Sun took advantage of them. As time went by, 3 months had passed unknowingly. To the delight of the whole camp, Li Duxing woke up from a coma and there was no sequelae in his body. What made people unhappy was that after Li Duxing woke up, he went to find Lin Sun. It was said that they drank until dawn that night, which was very enjoyable. Lin Sun is such a maggot. It's so hateful. We can't bear it anymore. We worked hard and risked our lives to collect the divine crystals, and we can't let this freeloader continue to enjoy them. On this day, someone finally couldn't bear it anymore and decided to settle accounts with Lin Sun. Suddenly, the whole camp was in an uproar. Many strong people who had been dissatisfied with Lin Sun for a long time gathered together and went to the top of the mountain in a mighty manner. When Shi Yu and Ning Meng heard the news, they couldn't help frowning and sneering. These guys were obviously jealous of Lin Sun. When they learned the identity of the strong person who took the lead to settle accounts with Lin Sun, Shi Yu and others were a little surprised. "Why is it that guy?" Ning Meng even exclaimed. P.S. Please vote for those who support adding more chapters tonight. Chapter 1446. Song Wuk. He was a genius from the Song family, a rising star in Green Deer School, and an outstanding cultivator who was regarded as a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. In the current camp of the Empire, his combat power could be ranked in the top 5. Now, he was the one who took the lead to rush to the top of the mountain to settle scores with Lin Sun. When they heard the news, Shi Yu, Ning Meng, and the others couldn't sit still and hurried to the top of the mountain. They all knew very well that Song Wuk was not only a veritable cultivation genius, but also a resolute and ruthless figure. His strength had long been beyond doubt. However, what puzzled Shi Yu and Ning Meng was that Song Wuk had always kept a low profile and never got involved in any dispute. Why did he take the lead to make trouble for Lin Sun this time? Was it really because he felt it was unfair? Things might not be so simple. On the way to the top of the mountain, Shi Yu and the others saw many people who looked excited and eager to join in the fun. It didn't take long for them to reach the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain was steaming with rosy clouds and purple mist, like the dwelling place of immortals. There were only 2 stone houses on the top of the mountain. One belonged to Princess Zhao Xingye, but she was not there now. The other belonged to Lin Sun, which was specially prepared by Princess Zhao Xingye for Lin Sun. This kind of special treatment was very easy to make people jealous, because everyone knew that Misty Cloud Mountain was the best sacred blessed land in the bloodthirsty battlefield, and the top of Misty Cloud Mountain was the most sacred blessed land. Even sages couldn't resist the temptation of cultivating here. But now, Lin Sun was enjoying this kind of treatment. This made people feel more and more unbalanced. Why? At this moment, Song Wuk was standing in front of the stone house where Lin Sun was. He was thin, his facial features were firm, and his back was as straight as a sword. His clothes were simple, but he exuded a fierce and terrifying aura. A group of strong practitioners of the Empire gathered in the distance, and they couldn't hide their excitement. They had been patient for a long time. Now, someone had finally made things difficult for Lin Sun, the vermin, and it was a powerful figure like Song Wuk. This made them look forward to the imminent revenge. The 7th prince, Zhao Jingfeng, and Qin Feiyu were also in the crowd. However, Zhao Jingfeng was a little surprised, and he couldn't help but transmit his voice. "How did you convince Song Wuk? I remember that this person doesn't like to stir up trouble and never gets involved in any dispute. He's only obsessed with cultivation." Qin Feiyu smiled confidently. "I just told him that Lin Sun would replace Li Duxing in 2 years and participate in the Taoist Mount contest as the last one of our empire. And then he agreed?" Zhao Jingfeng was stunned. Qin Feiyu nodded. "Song Wuk lacks nothing but cultivation. Last year, when he learned that Li Duxing would participate in the contest on Taoist Mountain on behalf of the Empire, he directly went to Li Duxing and had a duel with him. Now, he just changed his opponent to Lin Sun." Zhao Jingfeng was enlightened and praised. "Song Wuk is a wonderful man," Qin Feiyu said with a smile. "Only in this way can we see how capable Lin Sun is." Since he entered Cloud Mountain, he has hardly left his house and never contributed to the empire. However, he was favored by His Highness Zhao Xingye and given special care, which has already made people extremely dissatisfied. After a pause, he continued, "Now, Song Wuk has come to us. If Lin Sun can withstand this challenge, we will have nothing to say. But if he can't," Zhao Jingfeng sneered, "if he can't withstand it, Lin Sun will not only lose face, but also arouse public anger. You will be regarded as a vermin and everyone will want to beat you. At that time, even my aunt can't protect you." Qin Feiyu said, "The seventh prince is right. The most important thing is that Lin Sun will no longer be qualified to enjoy that special care in the future. Lin Sun, come out and accept the challenge." Many voices were shouting, as if they wanted to see the world in chaos. Shi Yu and Ning Meng frowned, but they couldn't say anything. Song Wuk came to challenge openly, so no one could stop him. Remember those guys who fan the flames. Find a chance to deal with them in the future. Shi Yu transmitted his voice with a smile, but there was a trace of cruelty in his words. Of course. Ning Meng sneered, "Jealousy can distort people. These guys dare to target Lin Sun. Obviously, they are blinded by jealousy." It didn't take long for the closed door of the stone house to be pushed open. Lin Sun, who had been in closed-door training for several months, appeared in front of everyone. He was still dressed in moon-white clothes, with a plain and otherworldly temperament. His eyes swept across the crowd and fell on Song Wuk. Since Lin Sun returned to the mortal world, he hadn't encountered such a thing for a long time. His first reaction was that Song Wuk was he stupid? In this camp, the only one who could give him pressure was Zhao Xingye. In addition, he had already proved his strength by slapping the seventh prince Zhao Jingfeng twice on the first day he arrived. Lin Sun was very surprised that someone still stood up to challenge him at such a time. Either Song Wuk was stupid or he was being used. Thinking of this, Lin Sun felt bored and asked directly, "Aren't you afraid of death?" Song Wuk didn't have time to state his intention or even say a word when he heard such a question. He couldn't help but be stunned. The other strong people present were also stunned. This question was too straightforward, completely catching them off guard. Previously, they had planned to scold, attack, accuse, and reprimand Lin Sun, the vermin, in order to boost Song Wuk's momentum. But Lin Sun's 3 words directly caught them off guard. It felt as if a meticulously prepared banquet had been announced to end before it had even begun. It was too infuriating and unpleasant. "I'm afraid of death." Unexpectedly, after staring at Lin Sun for a moment, Song Wuk directly admitted that he was also afraid of death. This was too much of a blow to his prestige. The anticipation and excitement of being about to get their revenge were suddenly stifled in their chests, making them feel indescribably uncomfortable. Lin Sun was also stunned. He took another look at Song Wuk and said, "Why don't you leave if you're afraid of death?" "I'm leaving now." Song Wuk did not hesitate and answered very quickly. When he first met Lin Sun, he didn't feel any threat at all, just like the others. But when Lin Sun asked those 3 words, Song Wuk suddenly felt an indescribable sense of danger. It was as if he'd been stared at by a lethal threat, causing the skin on his entire body to tense up as if there was a blade on his back, and his mind even endured a form of indescribable pressure. He immediately judged that once he started fighting, he would definitely lose, so he gave up happily. However, his reaction made all the people present speechless. It was as if they had eaten a dead fly, and their faces suddenly became extremely ugly. Previously, they came in large numbers, rubbed their palms and talked excitedly, as if they could get rid of Lin Sun today and vent their hatred. For this reason, they swarmed here to witness Lin Sun's defeat with their own eyes. They were even ready to trample on Lin Sun when he was defeated and spit on his face to let him know how miserable the fate of being a vermin was. But they didn't expect that after a few simple and direct words, Song Wuk directly gave up the fight. It was a strong start but weak finish. It was a big thunder but a small raindrop. Some strong practitioners almost coughed up blood. How could Song Wuk do this? As for Qin Feiyu and Zhao Jingfeng, their smiles froze on their faces. They were stunned and seemed to be in disbelief. There seemed to be 10,000 wild horses galloping in their hearts. How could he, Song Wuk, admit defeat like this? He was one of the top 5 in the camp in terms of combat strength. He was a tough figure who didn't even frown when he fought with Li Duxing. He was a rare cultivation genius. How could he admit defeat like this? Everyone was petrified and confused. Even Shi Yu and Ning Meng had a look of astonishment on their faces. Only Lin Sun praised Song Wuk in his heart. Song Wuk was a man who could make prompt decisions when he sensed that something was wrong. Before I leave, I have one thing to do. Suddenly, Song Wuk opened his mouth and attracted everyone's attention. Many people were refreshed. Qin Feiyu looked relieved and said with a smile, "It should be like this. It should have been like this a long time ago." Clang! Song Wuk suddenly drew out his sword. The blade was like a clear pool of autumn water, shining with sharp and dazzling cold light in the sky. And the tip of the sword was pointed straight at Qin Feiyu. This sudden scene not only shocked everyone present, but also made them almost scream. Even Qin Feiyu was stiff and his eyes almost fell out. He just said it should be like this, but a sword stabbed at him. It was so sudden that he was caught off guard. Bang! The blade rolled back at an incredible speed, broke through Qin Feiyu's defense and resistance, and hit him hard on the shoulder. With a dull sound, Qin Feiyu was sent flying. Like a kite with a broken string, he fell off the cliff and fell into the sea of clouds. After a long while, his cry of anger, confusion, and pain came out, shaking the sea of clouds and causing them to roll violently. The experts who were dumbfounded couldn't help but shiver. They were shocked by the strange scene. Probably no one had expected that a challenge to Lin Sun would end with Qin Feiyu being beaten. It was too incredible. With a clang, Song Wuk withdrew his sword. Without explaining, he cupped his hands to Lin Sun from a distance and said, "I'm sorry for my rudeness." Then he turned around and left. Everyone was still in a trance. Only Zhao Jingfeng knew that Song Wuk's sword was to express his dissatisfaction and warning to Qin Feiyu. "Everyone, please go back." After saying this, Lin Sun turned around and returned to the stone house. From beginning to end, he didn't make a move, but everyone realized that something was wrong. Song Wuk was by no means a person who liked to play tricks on people. The reason why he gave up the challenge was that he had noticed something and recognized something. For a moment, the depression and unwillingness in people's hearts turned into a kind of surprise and doubt, spreading all over their bodies. When they looked at Lin Sun's stone house again, many people showed complicated expressions. Everyone knew that no one dared to provoke Lin Sun in the future, and the special treatment this worm got was bound to continue. This result was undoubtedly very frustrating. From this day on, Lin Sun's life became peaceful again, and he spent every day in extremely fulfilling cultivation. Time flew by like a streak of light amidst this peaceful cultivation. P.S. Thank you, everyone, for your monthly tickets and support. Here's to you. Chapter 1447. No one knew the year in the mountains. Flowers bloomed and withered. Lin Sun had been in Cloud Mountain for a year. During the year, there were often fierce fights between the Empire, the Voodoo Barbarian Alliance, and the Alliance of 10,000 Races. Almost all of them were related to fighting for divinity crystals and magic medicines. In general, the situation of the Empire's strongmen became more and more pessimistic in this year. All the strongmen of the Empire who went out to practice had to go out in groups, and the range of activities was much smaller. The reason was that both the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the Alliance of 10,000 Races pointed their spears at the Empire. Although the two camps didn't join hands on the surface, everyone knew that they must have reached some kind of cooperation in secret. Buzz. On this day, on the top of Cloud Mountain, one after another brilliant divine rainbows rushed out of the stone house where Lin Sun was practicing in seclusion. Each divine rainbow was full of magical jade luster, as if it were real, rushing into the sky, which was magnificent and spectacular. In the stone house, Lin Sun's qi and blood were steaming and roaring, evolving into Shang Qing, Yu Qing, Tai Qing, Ling Qing, Yuan Qing, Su Qing and so on, which flowed endlessly and surrounded him. Looking carefully, every inch of his skin and pores was crystal clear, gushing with Taoist light. Between his bones, qi and blood, there were clanging sounds of Taoism. Swish! When Lin Sun opened his eyes, a horrible and oppressive pressure spread out, making the void around him wail and collapse as if bowing down to him. I broke through. Lin Sun's heart was filled with joy. In the past year, his body-refining cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds from the second tribulation of the longevity realm to the sixth tribulation of the longevity realm. He broke through 4 realms in 1 year. If this was spread out, it would shock the world and be called a miracle. But for Lin Sun, this kind of progress was normal. The bloodthirsty battlefield was a first-class cultivation paradise, and the place where he cultivated in seclusion was the peak of the Azure Cloud Mountain. The cultivation resources he enjoyed were endless divine origin crystals and elixirs, and the cultivation techniques he cultivated were the 9-clarity holy physique art and the divine elephant martial emperor's physique refinement technique. It would be abnormal if he was unable to make great progress in his body refinement cultivation. The most important thing was that Lin Sun had already passed every tribulation on the way to immortality, so there was no threshold or barrier to the cultivation of body refining. As long as he continued cultivating, his body refinement cultivation would be able to advance by leaps and bounds smoothly. Moreover, Lin Sun prioritized steadiness when he cultivated, and he didn't take any rash action, which made his body refining foundation extremely solid. Lin Sun was confident that he could improve his body refining cultivation to a higher level within a year if he only focused on improving his realm. But he didn't. Lin Sun was already very surprised and pleasantly surprised to be able to steadily advance his body-tempering cultivation to the 6th tribulation realm within a year. In fact, other practitioners could also achieve this if they had the cultivation resources and talent that Lin possessed. The reason was very simple. Whether it was body refining, qi refining, or soul refining, they all reached the same goal by different means. As long as one achieved extremely high attainments in one way and took into account the cultivation of other ways, he could often achieve twice the result with half the effort. What really satisfied Lin Sun was that with the improvement of his body refining cultivation, his spiritual veins were also transforming little by little. As early as in the domain of extinction, he had noticed that the improvement of his body refining cultivation had a very close connection with his talent of devouring abyss. The stronger his body refining cultivation was, the stronger the strange fluctuation produced by the spiritual veins was, and his talent also produced a kind of magical transformation. Just like at this moment, as he ran his body refining cultivation, the spiritual veins were like a shining sun, dazzling, filled with strange obscure fluctuations, with a sense of liveliness. When I broke through the 9th level of the heaven accessing place, I obtained a strand of destiny dark force, which could awaken the talent power and stimulate the brand of origin in the talent power. Thus, I could master a talent power that truly belongs to my bloodline. Lin Sun realized that with the improvement of his body refining cultivation, he was getting closer and closer to awakening his talent power. He was very much looking forward to seeing what kind of inconceivable power the devouring abyss inherent ability would possess. After silently sensing his own body refining strength for a long time, Lin Sun stood up and walked out of the stone house. He had already realized that it was useless to improve his cultivation behind closed doors. If his body refining strength wanted to transform again, he must carry out real tempering. At that time, Do So once said that although his body refining strength was strong, it lacked real tempering and sublimation. Lin Sun would never forget this point. To hone his cultivation, fighting was undoubtedly the most effective way. Thinking of this, Lin Sun walked down the mountain. Divinity crystals are getting more and more difficult to collect. Some of the known good places have been monopolized by those barbarians and aliens of the myriad races. It's really hateful. On the side of the Voodoo Barbarian Alliance, there are Gemini of light and dark with superb combat power. In addition, there are 10 outstanding shaman kings of the longevity realm, each of whom is not weaker than Song Wuk. The Gemini of light and dark is even more terrible. I'm afraid only Li Duxing can match them in the camp of our empire. As for the alliance of 10,000 races, the top 10 of the 10,000 races combat strength leaderboard are all top-notch, and any one of them would be considered a 1-in-a-million genius. Some are gifted beyond compare, some have unparalleled innate physique, and some have sky-high comprehension. On the side of the empire, only a few people, such as Li Duxing, Song Wuk and Shi Yu, have the ability to fight against them. But relatively speaking, the real peak strength is far behind. In the camp of Misty Cloud Mountain, many people were talking about it. They looked more or less depressed. The bumpy and embarrassing situation of the empire made them all feel the same. The most intuitive manifestation was that the number of divinity crystals and magic medicines collected every day was sharply reduced. This had affected their cultivation. If this situation continued, the power of the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the alliance of myriad races would only become stronger and stronger, and the power of the empire would be further weakened. Recently, similar sighs almost shrouded the Misty Cloud Mountain, making it gloomy and gloomy. Hey, what day is it today? Why is the maggot willing to come out from the top of the mountain? Suddenly, someone noticed Lin Sun coming from the mountain and couldn't help being surprised. It's really him. Others were also stunned. In the past year, Lin Sun rarely showed up in public, especially in the last 6 months. He hadn't stepped out of the stone house where he lived. Those who didn't know Lin Sun might think that there was no such person on the Misty Cloud Mountain. Most of those who knew Lin Sun didn't feel ashamed to mention him. Even if they knew that this guy was not easy to deal with, they were still angry. The reason was very simple. In the year since Lin Sun entered the Misty Cloud Mountain, he had slapped Zhao Jingfeng violently, exposed Zhao Jinglin's identity as the servant of Evil Vine, and forced Song Wuk to retreat with one sentence. At other times, Lin Sun had been like a maggot, enjoying the special care from Zhao Xingye. He had inexhaustible divinity crystals and magic medicines, but he had never contributed to the Empire camp. Not even once. This naturally made people feel very unfair. So what if his cultivation was strong? What was the difference between him and a maggot if he didn't serve the Empire camp? What made these strong people of the Empire most angry was that most of the divinity crystals Lin Sun enjoyed were collected by them at the risk of their lives. Nowadays, the situation of the Empire camp became more and more embarrassing, and the number of divinity crystals collected was getting less and less. But the number of divinity crystals Lin Sun enjoyed had never been sharply reduced. Who would feel balance? Why? Therefore, when Lin Sun appeared at this time, those strong people of the Empire didn't have a good look on their faces. They snorted coldly, despised him, or directly turned their heads and ignored him. However, no one dared to sneer at him. The 2 slaps on Zhao Jingfeng's face were still vivid in people's minds. The scene of Song Wuk being forced to retreat was still clearly remembered. Everyone knew that Lin Sun was not easy to deal with, but it couldn't change the fact that people regarded him as a maggot. Seeing this, Lin Sun felt a little strange, because he didn't know that Shi Yu and Ning Meng had never mentioned to him that he was regarded as a maggot. That was to say, Lin Sun himself didn't know the special care he had enjoyed in the past year. Bah! When Lin Sun passed by a young man in a gray robe, the latter suddenly spat at him fiercely. Although he didn't say anything, his disdain was obvious. Lin Sun immediately stopped and said, "Did I provoke you?" The young man in a gray robe was stunned, and then said with a gloomy face, "Don't you know what you have done?" "What?" Lin Sun was surprised. Seeing Lin Sun's innocent and puzzled look, the young man in a gray robe trembled with anger. This maggot had enjoyed so much special care, but didn't he feel ashamed at all? Didn't he have a conscience? Damn it! The young man in a gray robe left angrily, as if he was ashamed to be associated with Lin Sun. He was worried that he would spit blood out of anger if he went on. Lin Sun was confused. He glanced at others and saw that they didn't want to see him, which made him more confused. What's going on? Finally, Lin Sun found Shiryu, who was about to go out, and asked about it. Shiryu said with a smile, "What else can it be? Jealousy. Ning Meng is right. Jealousy makes people twisted, and jealousy makes people disgusted. You don't have to pay attention to it. Just focus on your cultivation. What's going on? Even if you are jealous, you should give a reason, right?" Lin Sun was puzzled. Shiryu had no choice but to tell him the whole story. After understanding it, Lin Sun was speechless for a while and said angrily, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Shiryu said with a cheeky smile, "How could we stop you from taking advantage of us? Don't pretend to be innocent after taking advantage of us. That will make you look shameless." Lin Sun grabbed him and said, "Let's go out and take a walk." Shiryu was stunned. "What for?" "To wash away the shame of being a maggot," Lin Sun said seriously. P.S. The second one is a little late. In addition, there are only 2 days left before the end of the month. If you don't vote now, it will be invalid. Chapter 1448. On this day, the strongmen who stayed on the Cloud Mountain all found that the vermin actually went out. It was like a miracle. For a whole year, the vermin ate and drank for free, enjoyed all kinds of care, and lived a happy life. Now, he was willing to leave? Everyone was astonished and couldn't believe what they were seeing. What is the vermin going to do? For a time, this topic became the focus of people's discussion. After eating and drinking, he wants to move. Maybe he wants to go out for a walk and relax? Someone raised his eyebrows. That must be the case. Some people gnashed their teeth, and the more they thought about it, the more indignant they became. They all lived such a hard life, but the vermin enjoyed all kinds of benefits and still had the leisure to go out for a walk. Maybe he found his conscience and intends to work for the empire. Someone whispered. Suddenly, he suffered a lot of fierce criticism. Conscience? Do you think that vermin has a conscience? Don't mention conscience to a shameless guy like him. He doesn't deserve it. Even if he really has a conscience, he has already been fed to the dogs. For a time, it seemed that Lin Sun would be condemned by word and pen. On the top of the mountain, Zhao Xingye, who was in closed-door training in the stone house, couldn't help laughing. It must be uncomfortable to bear the infamy of a vermin. I'd like to see how you will wash away the shame and how you will calm everyone's anger. Everything was within her expectation. Under such circumstances, Zhao Xingye didn't believe that Lin Sun could sit still, and Lin Sun's departure today proved that she guessed right. No one knew that the special care for Lin Sun this year was intentional. The reason was very simple. The greater the benefits, the greater the responsibility. Now it was time for Lin Sun to contribute, and he was willing to do it. Zhao Xingye was very satisfied with this result. That is the Turtle Mountain, which is shaped like a giant tortoise, with rich mineral veins of primordial divine crystals. Just yesterday, it was occupied by the strong barbarians. In front of a towering mountain, Shiryu looked dignified and said, "It is said that there are 16 strong barbarians on this mountain, and each of them is not weaker than the 7th retribution of Longevity Realm." Lin Sun looked into the distance and said, "It is indeed a treasure mountain. Are you really going? Don't you need to call some people?" Shiryu couldn't help but say, "Although I'm very confident in your combat strength, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult with just the 2 of us." Hey, I haven't finished speaking, why are you leaving already? Seeing Lin Sun walking towards the Turtle Mountain in the distance, Shiryu was stunned for a while, but he still followed Lin Sun in a hurry. I say, the safest way is to call Ningmeng, Yiqi, and the other guys here. With the strength of US brothers, it will be a piece of cake to take down this mountain. Shiryu talked endlessly. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel helpless. If you believe me, can you stop talking nonsense? Shiryu said snappily. Wasn't I worried about you? You actually despised me? Fine, I'll watch you try to be brave by yourself. Don't get beaten down by me. Although he said that, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. In the past year, Lin Sun had hardly made a move. Although he knew that Lin Sun had stepped onto the legendary peerless path of cultivation, he hadn't seen Lin Sun make a move after all. So how could Shiryu not be worried? In the distance, on the turtle hibernating mountain, a strong voodoo barbarian on sentry found Lin Sun and Shiryu immediately and couldn't help being stunned. Just two people? Immediately, he showed a grim smile and said, Brothers, the bastards from the Empire are here to die. As soon as he finished speaking, figures rushed out one by one. They were all strong voodoo barbarians with a strong and terrifying aura. When they saw Lin Sun and Shiryu, they were also stunned. It seemed that they didn't expect that just two people dared to come here to die. It seems that the situation of the Empire is getting worse and worse. They even let these two guys come here to die. I feel a little sorry for them. Someone laughed. Don't talk nonsense. Let's finish it quickly. The divine crystals on this mountain will be dug out soon. We have to leave here before it gets dark. The leading man in a beast robe gave an order in a deep voice. I'll go and meet them. Immediately, a thin figure covered in flames from the fire barbarian lineage's seventh tribulation eminence rushed out. Like a flaming divine rainbow, he charged into the distance. You follow them. Don't be careless. The leading man in a beast robe gave an order. Immediately, another 3 strong voodoo barbarians took the order and rushed to the distance. They are coming. Shiryu's eyes narrowed, and his whole body was surging with fighting intent. At the same time, he said, It's not shameful to run away if you can't beat them. The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched and he felt helpless. Should he tell Shiryu that these guys were not good enough at all? In this case, Shiryu would think that he was blowing his own trumpet. Just 2 of you? Boom. The void shook, and the strong fire barbarian broke through the air. His eyes were like flames and lightning, and he glanced at Lin Sun and Shiryu with disdain. Shiryu's face darkened. Being ignored like this, he couldn't help but get angry and was about to curse. But Lin Sun had already launched an attack. He didn't want to talk nonsense at all. Boom. With a simple punch, the surging vital energy transformed into a dazzling light that converged within his fist. It was simply like an ancient fiend god had lifted up a divine mountain and tossed it out, and it shook the heavens and the earth and threw space into disorder. Then, the strong fire barbarian, who had just arrived with a disdainful look, was blown up under Shiryu's astonished gaze. His body suddenly exploded like a piece of paper, which was more poignant and beautiful than the fireworks in the world. One punch killed a strong practitioner in the 7th retribution of longevity realm. Lin Sun stopped and frowned. So weak? It seemed that he couldn't believe it. Shiryu said in a daze, indeed very weak, but how? He didn't know what to say for a moment. His heart was in turmoil, and he only felt that the power of the punch just now was amazing. No, it's a master. Let's go together. Soon, the 3 strong voodoo barbarians arrived. Seeing the scene of the strong fire barbarian being blown up, they were so shocked that their bodies stiffened and their faces became solemn. Let me try again, Lin Sun said in a low voice. Okay. Shiryu nodded. He took a deep breath and held his breath, as if he wanted to see clearly what would happen next. After all, the punch just now was so fast that he didn't have time to react. The strong fire barbarian had been blown up, which was incredible. Kill. The 3 strong voodoo barbarians rushed over. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, Lin Sun punched 3 times with pure body refining cultivation. What he used was the illusory battle seal, a body refining combat method in the 9 purity holy body scripture. Every punch was like the seal of the Great Way, which could break the 9th heaven, suppress yin and yang, and break the universe. It was extremely fierce and overbearing. After that, 3 bodies exploded in midair, and they were like 3 blood-colored fireworks that bloomed in the sky. It was sad, beautiful, and terrifying. Dead? Sure, you gasped. This time, he finally saw clearly that it was not that the opponents were too weak, but that Lin Sun's strength was too strong and terrible, with absolute crushing power. That feeling was like a tiger waving its claws and swatting a few flies to death. But sure, you knew that those were not flies, but powerful practitioners in the longevity realm. Any one of them was enough to make many strong practitioners in the camp of the Empire vigilant. This proved again that Lin Sun was very strong, extraordinarily strong. Too weak. Lin Sun sighed at this time, a little disappointed. He didn't go out to relax, but to sharpen his body refining cultivation and wash away the shame of being a vermin. But he never thought that the opponents were so weak. Is it these guys who made the camp of the Empire suffer setbacks? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Sure, you suddenly felt a kind of unspeakable shame and uneasiness, but he braced himself and said, "In fact, they are not so weak." This was really too shocking, and sure you didn't know how to explain it. In the distance there was a commotion. The beast-robed man and others who were still on the Turtle Mountain all found that something was wrong, and their faces changed greatly. "We met a tough guy. But who is that guy? Why haven't I heard of him before?" They felt cold in their hearts. He was able to kill their companions with a casual wave of his hand. His combat strength was too terrifying, and it caused them to realize the danger they were in. "We can't deal with this kind of person at all. Retreat." The beast-robed man made a prompt decision. As soon as an expert made a move, he would know whether there was a real expert or not. He would not risk his life to test it. Those who could cultivate to this level were not fools, so they naturally knew who to provoke and who not to provoke. Retreat. Immediately, the beast-robed man and others chose to escape without hesitation. Whoosh. However, since Lin Sun was here, how could he watch them escape? In an instant, his figure disappeared out of thin air. Sure, you immediately attacked. His figure was extremely fast. He didn't want Lin Sun to fight alone. Boom. However, before he caught up with Lin, he saw a sudden fluctuation in the distance. The world shook and the clouds collapsed. A strong voodoo barbarian was killed, and his blood stained the void. Freak. Sure, you cursed in his heart as his lips twitched. He continued to chase another strong voodoo barbarian, but in the blink of an eye, the strong voodoo barbarian he locked on was also killed. His body burst into pieces like a rain of blood. Sure, you couldn't bear to see such a miserable scene. Boom. In the following time, strong voodoo barbarians were killed one after another, and their bodies burst in the void, which made Sure you speechless for a while, and his face changed constantly. He suddenly found that he didn't even have a chance to intervene with his combat power, which was really shocking. But soon, Sure you was refreshed. He found that Lin Sun finally met his opponent. It was the beast-robed man. Although this guy only had the cultivation of the 7th retribution of longevity, his combat power was extremely strong, which couldn't be compared by ordinary people. Finally, I met a decent one. Inexplicably, Sure you felt a sense of relief in his heart. However, before he sighed with emotion, the beast-robed man's body was also blown up with a shrill scream. In the blood rain, Lin Sun's clothes were clean, and he sighed faintly in the void. This scene made Sure you completely stunned, and his lips twitched. Why couldn't he not be so brutal? Chapter 1449. With a sigh, Lin Sun stopped thinking and began to collect the spoils. The most important thing was to collect divinity crystals. He already understood that the divinity crystals consumed in this year's practice were all collected by other strong practitioners in the camp. This was the main reason why he had to bear the infamy of vermin. Lin soon decided to make it up to him. He never wanted to take advantage of others. Most importantly, the name of leech was too bad. On the Turtle Mountain, there were still some spiritual veins of divinity crystals that had not been collected. Lin Sun also dug them up one by one. After doing all this, Lin Sun looked at the sky and said, "It's still early before dark. Let's find another place. It's better to have some decent opponent." Sure Yu nodded in a trance. Immediately, he came to his senses and cried, "What did you say? Are we still going to kill enemies?" Lin Sun took it for granted and said, "It's still early. It's too wasteful not to do more things." Sure Yu felt a headache. Up to now, he hadn't figured out why Lin Sun's combat power was so terrible. His mind was in an unspeakable shock and trance. But now, Lin Sun still planned to continue killing enemies, which made Sure Yu wonder if in Lin Sun's eyes, those enemies were all harmless cabbages that could be broken at will. "Let's go," Lin Sun urged. Originally, he intended to tell Sure Yu that it would not be so troublesome to fight with Qi refining realm cultivators. He only needed to release Taixian's sword Qi to end the battle in an instant. But seeing Sure Yu's frightened look, Lin Sun finally held back. He was worried that Sure Yu would not be able to bear the fact. 2 hours later, the two of them arrived before a lake. The lake was vast, azure, and clear, and there were expanses of jade-green lotus leaves and numerous lotus flowers that were pink like the rosy clouds. The lotus leaves were green and the lotus flowers were red. The scene was picturesque. Sure Yu had completely calmed down and accepted the fact that Lin Sun's combat power was terrible. However, his expression turned solemn when he arrived. "This is the Green Lotus Lake," he said. "It was occupied by the elites of the Alliance of 10,000 Races yesterday. At the time, 2 of our companions were killed in a dispute over this treasure land. You must be careful. I heard that among the beasts guarding this place, there are a few who are strong enough to be ranked in the top 30 of the Myriad Clan's combat power ranking." Hey, I haven't finished. Halfway through his words, Sure Yu found that Lin Sun had already rushed into the depths of the lake. Boom! Unsurprisingly, a battle broke out. This time, Lin's opponents were 7 strong barbarians from the Alliance of 10,000 Races, whose realms might not be much different from those barbarians he had met before. However, all of them were extremely powerful. In particular, there were a few among them who possessed extremely powerful divine abilities and rich battle experience. The might they displayed was also extremely powerful. Instead of being surprised, Lin Sun was overjoyed. He ran his body refining cultivation and fought with him. Sure Yu had intended to help, but was stopped by Lin Sun, which annoyed Sure Yu. Did this guy think he couldn't help? But after careful observation for a moment, Sure Yu had to admit that if he were Lin Sun, he would have been unable to hold on. In other words, in the face of such a bad and dangerous situation, his first choice was to retreat instead of fighting. After all, there were a few extremely tricky guys among those opponents. Sure Yu was not afraid of fighting one-on-one, but he could only retreat if there were many of them. From this point, Sure Yu also realized that Lin Sun's combat power had already become extremely powerful after more than 10 years, far beyond his imagination. 15 minutes later, the battle was over and the blood permeated the green lake. Lin Sun cleaned up the trophies and sighed as if he was not satisfied. Still not satisfied? Sure Yu opened his eyes wide. "There's pressure, but not much. It's difficult to hone my cultivation." Lin Sun muttered, "Let's go and continue to find enemies while it's still early." Sure Yu's expression changed. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm convinced. I'm not convinced by anyone but you." Next, Sure Yu happily took Lin Sun to run around. Over the past year, the Empire's camp could only be described as retreating step by step. Whether it was Shiryu or other strong men of the Empire, they all held back their anger. At present, Lin Sun's attitude of killing and sweeping away everything made Shiryu shocked and speechless, but he also felt extremely happy. The resentment in his heart was vented a lot. He even wanted to see how many places Lin Sun could destroy before dark. Snowmist Mountain was covered with white snow all year round, full of mist and crystal ice. There were extremely rich divine crystal ores here, but it was difficult to collect them. The Voodoo Barbarian camp had been stationed here for half a month. Moreover, in order to guard this mineral vein, the Voodoo Barbarian camp sent 18 elite King Realm strongmen. But after Lin Sun's arrival, the 18 elite Voodoo Barbarians were killed in just 30 minutes, and their blood dyed the Snow Mountain. Spirit Wind Valley. The place controlled by the alliance of 10,000 races. The Ghost River. The Voodoo Barbarian camp. The Broken Star Abyss. In the following time, the places controlled by the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races were uprooted one after another. It was like a hot knife cutting through butter. It was dusk. Lin Sun and Shiryu returned to the camp. "Ha, the vermin is back." When seeing Lin Sun, many strong men showed the familiar look of contempt. This time, Lin Sun corrected them seriously. "I didn't know the situation before, so you misunderstood me. It's reasonable to be scolded. Don't worry, I will compensate you. But at the same time, I don't want to hear the word vermin again. It's really unpleasant." After that, he left and returned to the top of the mountain. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they couldn't help sneering. Misunderstanding? It's been a year. Who doesn't know the fact that Lin Sun is a vermin? It's disgusting to pretend to be a vermin. A woman said angrily. Don't pay attention to him. It's just a vermin's clamor. Someone sneered and sneered at Lin Sun's words. But he said he would compensate us. Someone was doubtful. Compensation, my ass. In a year's time, he alone has consumed tens of thousands of divine origin crystals, not to mention the divine medicines that he has ruined. Can he compensate for it? Someone gnashed his teeth. His words successfully aroused the indignation in the hearts of others. All of them were distressed and their faces became gloomy. This time, a huge amount of scarce cultivation resources were wasted by a vermin. It was outrageous. Sure you didn't leave. Looking at the resentful, contemptuous and disdainful appearance of the people gnashing their teeth, he suddenly had a kind of unspeakable sympathy and pity in his heart. Clatter with a wave of his sleeve, a hill suddenly appeared on the ground. It was crystal clear and dazzling, full of divine luster. The people who were filled with indignation suddenly froze and couldn't help rubbing their eyes. Finally, they dared to confirm that this hill was actually piled up by pieces of divine crystals. There must be at least 3,000 divine crystals, right? Someone cried out. Anyone who saw so many divine crystals would inevitably be shocked. After all, these things were not cabbages that could be found everywhere. Instead, they were rare treasures that were of great benefit to the cultivation of sages. In the past, the experts of the Empire would at most be able to gather 5 to 10 divine origin crystals per person. The shock of a few thousand divine origin crystals appearing all of a sudden was naturally indescribable. Is this collected by Brother Sure? Someone asked in a trembling voice. Sure, you said coldly. I also want to collect them, but unfortunately it's not me. Then who is it? Everyone was astonished. Lin Sun. Sure, you gently spat out 2 words. Then, he saw at a glance that everyone was stunned at first, and then suddenly stagnated. They seemed to be in disbelief, as if they had been struck by lightning. It was wonderful. For the first time, Sure you found that the feeling of being slapped in the face was so refreshing and indescribable. Before the crowd could react, Clatter Sure you waved his sleeve again, and a pile of divine medicine appeared on the ground. Each of them was flowing with Taoist light and filled with medicinal fragrance, dyeing the void with gorgeous colors. Everyone looked dull and stared blankly. The value of divine medicine was more precious than divine crystals. After more than 10 years of collection, the divine medicine in the bloodthirsty battlefield had become increasingly rare. But now there were more than 20 kinds of divine medicine placed there, which also caused a strong impact on everyone's mind. Their expressions changed, their mood fluctuated, and they were silent for a long time. A thought emerged in their minds at the same time. Could these divine medicine be the work of Lin Sun, the vermin like those divine crystals? Before they asked, sure you had already said, you guessed right. These divine medicine are also Lin Sun's trophies. His words were earth-shattering and made everyone dumbfounded. Seeing this, sure you felt refreshed as if he had eaten a ginseng fruit. The feeling of being slapped in the face was really intoxicating. The only regret was that the owner of these trophies was not himself. Thinking of this, sure you couldn't help looking at the top of the mountain and muttered in his heart, "This guy must be secretly happy now, right? How could this be done by that vermin?" Zhao Jingfeng opened his mouth. He had been disdainful to ridicule Lin Sun before, but now, after being shocked, he couldn't restrain his emotions and blurted out. Others nodded one after another. A vermin just went out for a stroll and collected so many treasures? Who could believe it? Sure you couldn't help sneering. If Lin Sun is a vermin, what are you? Don't take ignorance as an excuse for being blind. After that, he swaggered away. That night, the news that Lin Sun had collected a large number of divine crystals and divine medicine caused a great sensation in the Cloud Mountain. Most people were skeptical, and a few people didn't believe it at all. They thought that sure you and others were covering up for Lin Sun. The truth was that these treasures must have been put together by sure you and Lin Sun's friends. Whether it's true or not, we'll go out and have a look tomorrow. In the end, whether they believed it or not, many people decided to go out and have a look tomorrow. P.S. As usual, 2 updates in a row. Chapter 1450. Early the next morning, Lin Sun left the camp again. What greeted him was a group of suspicious and complicated expressions. It was a good change without the contempt and sarcasm of the past. He didn't know that after he left, many strong practitioners in the camp also went out with the idea of finding out the truth. In other words, they wanted to use facts to prove that Lin Sun, as a parasite, had falsified the spoils of war yesterday. This was normal. The prejudice caused by a year's misunderstanding was not destined to be resolved overnight. However, Lin Sun didn't care about these things. Let the facts speak for themselves. It was dusk. Lin Sun set foot on the way back to the camp. Compared with yesterday's harvest, today's harvest was not bad. After traveling thousands of miles, he successfully destroyed 7 places under the control of voodoo barbarians and the alliance of 10,000 races. He didn't meet many masters in the 7 battles, but the effect of tempering his body cultivation was significant and he benefited a lot. In particular, in one of the battles, he met a fierce character from voodoo barbarian branch named Jin Man. Jin Man's combat power was extremely strong, and the power he controlled was quite rare and terrible. In this battle, Lin Sun went all out with his body cultivation, but it took him a full quarter of an hour to kill Jin Man. Body refinement is to use pure strength to suppress strength. As the saying goes, one can defeat 10 people with pure strength. That's not the case. However, the tempering of body cultivation is not good enough. If it can be further perfected, it won't take so much effort to kill Jin Man. While summing up the fighting experience, Lin Sun walked into the camp of Cloud Mountain. Immediately, he was stunned. He suddenly found that many strong practitioners looked at him with an indescribable strange expression. The originally lively atmosphere suddenly became quiet with his arrival. "I'll go back first." Lin Sun didn't ask. He told Shiryu, who followed him all the way, and then turned back to the top of the mountain. There were still many people who hesitated to speak, but when they saw Lin Sun leave, they immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. Shiryu seemed to understand and couldn't help laughing, now you finally know the truth? Everyone smiled and nodded, but their smiles seemed a little stiff. Early this morning, they went out to investigate, and the results were shocking. No matter who saw the traces of battle, they would not be able to calm down. There was no doubt that some of the territories controlled by the enemy had been taken down by Lin Sun alone. No one could question this truth. In the end, they finally believed this fact. The guy whom they regarded as a vermin had actually turned over a new leaf, and turned over a new leaf. Moreover, the combat strength he displayed was extremely shocking. Crash, sure you didn't say anything further. With a flick of his sleeve, divinity origin crystals and divine medicines piled up on the ground, and it instantly drew the attention of everyone once more. Compared to yesterday, today's spoils of war were not much inferior. In fact, they were even better. Everyone's expression changed greatly, their emotions fluctuating. Is this what Lin Sun collected today? Someone exclaimed. What do you think? Sure you sighed and said, as a member of the same camp, I just want to advise you that Lin Sun is not someone you can slander at all. Everyone's expression was uncertain, and they felt quite wronged. Before this, Lin Sun's performance was really like a vermin. It was just that they never thought that Lin Sun would hide his strength so well. If Lin Sun had shown his ability earlier and served the Empire more, how could there have been so many misunderstandings? Lin Sun has no intention to argue or be angry with you. He also knows that this is a misunderstanding, so he will make up for it. Sure you sighed again and said, Everyone, it's time to resolve the misunderstanding. If a person like Lin Sun bears the infamy of a vermin, how will the other two camps regard us? Hearing this, everyone couldn't help nodding. Many people showed a look of shame. It was really ignorant of them to regard a peerless figure like Lin Sun as a vermin. Even Zhao Jingfeng, Qin Feiyu and others were speechless. What else could they say? Lin Sun had proved his strength with iron-like actions. By the way, Jin Man, one of the top 10 Immortal Realm Shaman Kings in the Voodoo Barbarian camp, has been killed by Lin Sun today. Sure you suddenly said. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone knew that Jin Man was a powerful figure comparable to Song Wuk. But now, he was killed by Lin Sun. While everyone was shocked, they couldn't help but remember that in the 3rd month after Lin Sun arrived at Cloud Mountain, Song Wuk once went to the top of the mountain to challenge Lin Sun. However, because of Lin Sun's words, he directly gave up the challenge. At that time, because of the hurried ending of this anticlimactic challenge, many people almost suffered internal injuries. But now because of Jin Man's death, they were sure why Song Wuk gave up. If I were you, I would take over and control the territories conquered by Lin Sun from tomorrow on. Those places are all first-class treasures, and there are bound to be a lot of divinity crystals that haven't been excavated yet. After that, sure you turned around and left. And the whole Empire's camp was completely boiling tonight. Lin Sun changed people's attitudes and views on him with his own actions. Moreover, because of the outstanding achievements he made, it also caused a lot of surprise and shock. In the morning of the 3rd day, Lin Sun left the camp again. The 4th day, the 5th day, it was the same. Every day, he could bring back rich trophies. And the attitude of the Empire's strongmen towards him also changed day by day. Gradually, no one called Lin Sun a vermin anymore. Not only in words, but also in their hearts, no one dared to slander him with this title. Gradually, Lin Sun found that every time he left or returned to the camp, those strongmen of the Empire looked at him with a kind of respect, admiration, and amazement. Even some women more or less showed a kind of love. But unfortunately, they were all ignored by Lin Sun, which made many women feel resentful. Although Zhao Xingye rarely showed up, she saw all these changes and couldn't help feeling happy. For many years, the Empire's camp had been targeted and suppressed by the other two camps. Especially in the past year, the situation of the Empire's camp was getting more and more embarrassing, which made her feel angry. and Lin Sun's attacks these days and his unstoppable way of winning undoubtedly helped the Empire's camp vent their anger. Happy. Only these two words could describe Zhao Xingye's mood at the moment. She believed that the other experts of the Empire were bound to feel the same way as she did. They felt great and elated. Half a month later. Before dusk, Lin Sun returned a few hours ahead of schedule, which made the strongmen in the camp surprised and amazed. "Brother Lin, did you encounter something difficult? Do you need any help?" Someone couldn't help asking. "Yes, Brother Lin, just tell us if you have any trouble. We can share it with you." The others also gathered around. Compared with half a month ago, they all looked with a kind of heartfelt respect. This was the change. However, they were all very confused. In the past, Lin Sun never returned to the camp until dusk fell. What happened this time? Lin Sun sneered, "Nothing. It's just that after wandering around for a long time, I can't find many enemies. Some of the territories controlled by them have already been abandoned. It's really disappointing. It's a waste of a day's work." The crowd was stunned at first, and then burst into laughter. "Motherf *Ker, those bastards must have been scared out of their wits and fled. I've never seen them so timid before. They must have known that Brother Lin was not easy to deal with, so they fled early." The crowd discussed happily. Recently, the declining situation of the Empire's camp had changed and seemed to be reversed. On the other hand, the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races began to retreat step by step like beaten beasts. This change, of course, made people excited and happy. And all these changes were caused by Lin Sun alone. From a distance, Zhao Jingfeng, Qin Feiyu and others saw Lin Sun, who was surrounded by the crowd, and their expressions were all complicated. Now, even if they were unwilling, they had to admit that since Lin Sun attacked, the situation of the Empire's camp had indeed been greatly improved. Even deep in their hearts, they were happy and excited about it. Unfortunately, because of some previous disputes and grievances, it was difficult for them to bury the hatchet with Lin Sun, and they were destined not to be friends. But at the same time, they had long given up the idea of targeting Lin Sun. It was very simple. Now in the Empire's camp, whoever went against Lin Sun was the enemy of everyone. This was the prestige of killing. "Lin Sun, from today on, you'd better not go out easily. Even if you want to go out, you should tell me in advance." When returning to the top of the mountain, Zhao Xingye found Lin Sun and warned him seriously. "The sages of the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races have now known your existence and have set their eyes on you. I'm afraid that they will secretly take action against you." Lin Sun was shocked and immediately sighed. "It's a pity that up to now, I haven't met some real top figures, such as the Gemini of Light and Darkness of the Voodoo Barbarian camp and the top 5 in the combat list of 10,000 races." Zhao Xingye couldn't help laughing. "It's not easy for them to show up. I'm worried that you will be targeted by the sages on their side, and the sages on their side are also worried that their top figures will be targeted by me, so no one will act rashly." After a pause, she continued, "However, when the Taoist Mountain contest begins a year later, you will have a chance to fight with the top figures of the alliance of 10,000 races." Lin Sun touched his nose and said, "That's the only way. P.S. Yesterday you voted a lot of monthly tickets and received a lot of tip. Goldfish will work hard to add one more chapter tonight. In addition, on the last day of the month, check whether you have monthly tickets in your account. They will be invalid tomorrow. Don't waste them."